Hello and welcome to a very special video. Today I will be showing you my complete Doctor Who DVD collection. This is part of the Advent calendar for December 2018. So, without further ado, let's get into it. For each story, if I've seen it, I'll give you my quick thoughts on it, and if I haven't, I may give some thoughts of things I've heard about it, but yeah, basically I'm going to run through all my DVDs, and yeah, this is just to showcase this DVD collection I have acquired for Doctor Who. Now, of course, every DVD collection has to begin with the Lost in Time box set. The most essential thing to a Doctor Who DVD collection is this Lost in Time box set, because this box set contains episodes from stories that are partly missing, and it is essential to have this box set. It has aged slightly as some of the stories have updated DVDs now that episodes have been found. However, I still think that this box set is a must-get if you are a Doctor Who DVD collector. So, of course, contains 18 stories. The Crusade, which I used to not be a big fan of, but now when I rewatched it, I found that I actually love it. I love The Crusade. It's a great, dark, historical. And of course, the Daleks' Master Plan, which is just a epic 12-part Dalek story. It's out of this world stuff. Just great story. I love it so much. The Celestial Toymaker, which is fucking crazy. It's one of the weirdest experimental Doctor Who stories of all time. Every episode's different, and every episode varies in quality. It's just wild, mad stuff. Underwater Menace, got the DVD for that, so we'll skip forward to the Faceless Ones. The Faceless Ones, I think, is a really underrated story. It is sort of mirroring of the Terror of the Zygons plot, except it's at an airport. And I actually... the ending's a bit rushed, but overall, I think I enjoy watching this story a little bit more than Terror of the Zygons to an extent. However, I think overall, I guess, it's not as iconic as the Zygons, but I think this is a really underrated Second Doctor story. And then we get to the evil of the Daleks. The last Dalek story of the 60s before they came back in the Pertwee era. Right, Evil of the Daleks, well, I do really like it. However, it does take a bit of a strange turn at the end, and it becomes a bit comic book. However, overall, great 7-part Dalek story, really enjoyable to watch. The Abominable Snowmen. Now, this is sort of a setup prequel story to the Web of Fear, and it is a relatively really enjoyable story with the Yeti and the Great Intelligence on a Tibetan mountain. However, I think it might just be a bit long. It does sag a bit, but overall, really enjoyable anyway. Skip forward to the Wheel in Space. I have not seen the Wheel in Space, but it sounds like a sort of... It's a Cyberman story that sort of divides opinion a bit. I think it tends to be regarded as the weakest of the 60s Cyberman stories. However, some people say it's still very good. And it is the introduction of Zoe as well. And the Space Pirates I have not seen, but it will be on the worst of Classic Who list that we are going through at the moment. Now we get to the proper DVDs, starting with the Beginnings box set, containing the first 3 stories, which are luckily still in existence. The Beginning box set, brilliant. So let's start with the very first Doctor Who story of all time. Hang on, let me just get this out of here. An Unearthly Child. Brilliant. I mean, what can I say? Brilliant way to start the show. I guess episodes 2 to 4, the caveman side of it, aren't the most engaging stuff, but I think they do really good character development for Ian and Barbara and Susan and the Doctor. But yeah, the main draw for this DVD is obviously the first episode. Absolutely outstanding television, just perfect way to start Doctor Who. such a magical episode of television. Absolutely love it. And then, of course, following that, we have the iconic and memorable The Daleks. Classic. I mean, what can I say? How could it not be? It's the first Dalek story. It's the one that came up with the most iconic monsters in Doctor Who. Atmospheric as fuck. It's a great adventure. Dark music. It's just chilling to watch. It is a bit of a plotting story. It's a 7-parter, but overall, really enjoyable. Just magical, atmospheric Doctor Who. Brilliant. And then, of course, we get to the third story, The Edge. Jesus, dropped my box here. We get to The Edge of Destruction, which has got a bit of sticky tape on the back. I don't know what that is. The Edge of Destruction. Discussed this in our experimental episodes video. Edge of Destruction is a real interesting one. It's quite a strange little story, to be honest. But I do really like it. I think it's a really nice character development story for the TARDIS, Barbara, Ian, Susan, and the First Doctor. Nice little bottle episode, low budget stuff, and yeah, enjoyable story. Of course, the next one is not on DVD, Marco Polo, all missing. I love Marco Polo, great adventure, so different to every other Doctor Who story. But the recon is really good to watch. It's in colour as well, which is fantastic. Marco Polo, great story. And then we get to The Keys of Marinus. My opinion, one of the most underrated Doctor Who stories of all time. I think The Keys of Marinus is absolutely awesome. It's a 6-parter, but it really divides the episodes well. It has these little mini stories going on. It sort of echoes early the Key to Time arc from Tom Baker's era, except it's done in one story. And yeah, a quest storyline is something you often see in fantasy and sci-fi, and it's quite a popular story for a reason, because it sort of gives you goals to set forward to, and it gives you a whole bunch of small stories to make up one big story. And yeah, I love The Keys of Marinus. Great, entertaining stuff. It's real cheap looking, but at the same time, most classic Who is cheap looking anyway, in its own charming way. I love The Keys of Marinus. Go check it out if you haven't already. Now, up next we have The Aztecs, one of my favourite Hartnell stories. The Aztecs is awesome. Just this great, magical, historical. It sort of sets up all the rules of time travel for the show. And it's just a fantastic episode. Great characters, great setting, great atmosphere. It's a great episode for Barbara as well. Absolutely awesome. If you haven't seen The Aztecs, what are you doing? It's just it's an essential First Doctor episode in my opinion. Just absolutely brilliant from start to finish. I enjoy almost all of this episode. It's so good. It's so enjoyable. Yeah, can't recommend it enough. I love The Aztecs. Absolutely brilliant. And then we get the Sensorites. Now, I'm sure if you've been paying attention to a lot of the videos, you'll notice that this Adam's first memory of this story is the cliffhanger to part 1 of this story. And it is, of course, a Sensorite outside the spaceship window, and it's a creepy looking cliffhanger. So yeah, obviously Adam has a lot of nostalgia for the story, and when I watch this episode, it's kind of Sensorites. It's a weird one because it's often regarded as one of the weakest Doctor Who stories of all time. However, I feel like that's only because of the demands of the television at the time, and the fact that they were forced to write such long stories that sometimes they didn't need that many episodes for. I think The Sensorites is a story that starts out really strongly, and over time, as it goes throughout all of its episodes, it gets a bit weaker and weaker and weaker, and it goes downhill, and then it starts to become a really bit of plodding TV, if you will. And it's such a shame, because I think there's some really neat ideas and concepts in this episode, and there's parts of it that I really enjoy, but unfortunately, because it's just so long, it makes it near impossible to sit through. But yeah, it's a shame. I still like the Sensorites anyway, but yeah, objectively, yeah, not written well, just because it was too long. But yeah, in an alternate universe, I'm sure that this story was a classic, but oh well. Then we got to get to the Season 1 finale, The Reign of Terror. Of course, this is a historical in pre-revolutionary France, I believe, during the, what's it called? Oh, French Revolution, that's right. So, actually, no, it's not pre, but it's during. And, yeah. For whatever reason, this one just doesn't really click with me. There's moments I enjoyed from this. I really like all the costumes, and the large abundance of characters is great. And some of the acting in it is really good too. I really like the acting. William Hartnell says this is his favourite story he ever did, and I can sort of see why, considering he was quite a serious sort of actor, and I can see he could respect the historical elements to it. And whilst I do think stylistically this is a really awesome production, I don't know. For whatever reason, this one just doesn't really click with me, and I may need to give it a rewatch, but yeah, Reign of Terror, not for me. But, you know, it's not harmful in any way. But, of course, now we're getting to Season 2, which is one of my favourite seasons of all time. Starting with Planet of Giants. Oh my god, what a magical, magical story. So underrated in my opinion. The fact that the TARDIS team gets shrunken down to smaller than ant size. I mean, I guess they're similar to ant size there, but it's to that level where they're the size of ants and they are living in a world of large people. Oh, it's just such a creative story. I love it so much. Don't understand why it gets so much hate, but I guess I can understand. It's quite an experimental story, and it's quite surreal, and it takes a lot of suspension of disbelief, but, you know, I love Planet of Giants. I have so much fun with it. Such a magical, creative episode, and it's just very reminiscent of that Verity Lambert era. And of course, we get to the iconic Dalek invasion of Earth. I mean, what hasn't already been said about this story? I guess, in some ways, objectively, you could argue it's not as good as some people say it is, and some of the direction's a bit shoddy. But, like, the magic of this story, the Daleks invading London and you know, being in Trafalgar Square with all the pigeons, and just the magical adventure of this episode is so charming and lovely, and Susan's exit is just one of those iconic moments in the show's history, and it's just one of those episodes that even if it has objective flaws, I'll never dislike this story. It's such a magical piece of television. I think it's the sort of most iconic story from the Hartnell era, and he gives his lovely speech at the end, which sort of defines him as a Doctor. Yeah, I love the Dalek invasion of Earth. It's just so magical. Then we get to The Rescue, which is a two-part story, and it is the introduction of Vicky. And I think this is a really, really cool one. It's a real tight story, really small scale and focused, and I really like it. I think it's a sort of a perfect introduction for Vicky's character. It's such a lovely small story, and it's perfectly timed coming after the Dalek invasion of Earth, sort of taking it back to square one, you know? And Hartnell's Doctor really warms at this point. A lot of the grouchy, nasty side of him has been developed into this really magical, lovely old Doctor. And yeah, I really enjoy The Rescue. I think it's a lovely little story, and it's such a... Season 2 is just so magical, and every story is just so enjoyable. Of course, following The Rescue, we have one of the funniest Doctor Who stories of all time, The Romans. Oh my god, I love The Romans. Just seeing the Doctor playing a lute, that scene is so funny. And just the fact that this episode has... the way it builds the world in Rome is fantastic, and all the characters, and just that TARDIS team, the dynamic between the first Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky is just one of the best in the show's history, in my opinion. I absolutely love this story. Everything about this era, so fun, so enjoyable, so magical, so unpredictable. The Romans is a classic. It's just so fun and lovely story. And then we get to probably the most controversial First Doctor story, the Web Planet. A lot of people really don't like this one because it's so out of this world and surreal. The Zabi and the Minotaur are some of the most aged costumes in Doctor Who history. But my point of view, look, it's real fantasy sort of comic book childlike sci-fi adventure. But honestly, I think this story is so underrated. I enjoy it so much. I mean, it is 6 parts and it is too long. And there's a lot of flaws in this story, a lot of really, there's a lot of fuck-ups with the production, but honestly, like I said, with a lot of these stories, it's just this magical Hartnell era, and every story from this era is just so enjoyable, just in its own way. It's so magical, and I love the wide planet setting. It's sort of, I feel like this is the only Doctor Who story that really tries to do something fully alien, no human or humanoid-like interactions. They wanted to do something wacky and big and large, and I can absolutely respect that. I enjoy the Web Planet for what it is. And then after that's the Crusade. I've already done a piece on that. And then after that, we get the Space Museum, which we did a bit of a piece on in the experimental episodes category. As Rob Sherman has stated before, this episode is very misunderstood. Most people consider, a lot of people, if you look at the DWM, the people that voted, they consider this to be the worst Hartnell story. And I think that's mainly because it's misunderstood. The first episode is absolutely outstanding piece of television, this wild, experimental, Twilight Zone-like opening part. I think it's brilliant. But then it evolves into a sort of parody of 60s Doctor Who, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoy it, and I think Hartnell especially is really enjoyable in this story. Yeah, it's probably the weakest of Season 2, but I think it's far from the weakest Hartnell story. I would rather this than some of the others, which I will get to. And then we get probably the silliest Dalek story of all time, The Chase. I mean, how do I describe this story? It's kind of like if the Daleks were on Looney Tunes. I mean, it is very silly, but honestly, I just love The Chase. I love watching it. It's such a fun adventure. So many laughs. It's so funny. I mean, you could criticize that this kind of ruins the Daleks in a way, but honestly, I really don't care. I just enjoy this story for what it is. It's so fun, and such a great send-off for Ian and Barbara. It's just sort of a lovely, nice end for their character arc. It's a feel-good ending, and yeah, I find The Chase so fun to watch. It's sort of, you have to take each story for what it's trying to do on its own merits, and I think The Chase for what it is absolutely awesome, and I love it. I love it. And then we get to the Season 2 finale. My favourite First Doctor story, The Time Meddler. This was the first classic DVD I actually bought, and I think I bought it about 10 years ago now. I have massive nostalgia for this story. The monk, played by Peter Butterworth, is so charming. Douglas Camfield's direction is awesome, and just the First Doctor, Vicky and Stephen are just a great team. I really enjoy this story, pretty much everything about it. I mean, I guess there are stories that have come since then that have blown it out of the water, but in terms of the First Doctor era, for me, this is it. This is prime Doctor Who for me. I just find this a magical, wonderful watch. I enjoy this story every time. It's one of those stories that I can watch from start to finish, and I'm never bored, and I'm really satisfied by the end, and there's not much more you could really want from a Doctor Who story. The Time Meddler is just outstanding. Now we get to Season 3, which has a lot of missing stories. The first one being Galaxy 4, which is partly on the Aztecs Special Edition box set. If you look at the back, where is it? Ah, there we go. Galaxy 4. there is a reconstruction of the missing story Galaxy 4 on this DVD. Galaxy 4 is the first story of Season 3, and it's... how do I say... it's not great. I mean, I enjoy it for what it is, but it's kind of like... It's kind of like the Web Planet in a way, where it sort of has a charming element to it, but I feel like for some reason Galaxy 4 doesn't hook me like the Web Planet does. It's got a neat sort of dynamic between these human blonde woman characters, all the same, against these cute little robotic sort of creatures. This is sort of your typical race war sort of thing going on, but you know, it's alright, I guess. It's not great. I mean, I wouldn't praise it that much, but Galaxy 4, take it or leave it. And then after that, we have Mission to the Unknown. We touched on this in the experimental episodes discussion. Mission to the Unknown, 1-part story, only 25 minutes long, but it's absolutely awesome. There's an animation for it on YouTube. Just go check it out. Ian Levine did the animation for Mission to the Unknown. It's a great prequel to the Daleks' Master Plan. And then following that, we have The Mythmakers, another missing story. Mythmakers is quite a popular sort of dark comedy, but unfortunately it's just not my cup of tea. I really, really, really don't like it. In fact, it's one of my least favourite Hartnell stories. I just find it too silly. It's not my cup of tea. It's not my sense of humour. And I really find the exit for Vicky and the Mythmakers is really underwhelming. It disappointed me a big time. Yeah, not a big fan. We've already touched on the Daleks' Master Plan, so we'll move on to the next one, which is the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. Another missing story, and yeah, the Massacre. Massacre is interesting. I think the actual idea behind it, the core point of view in this episode, being Stephen Taylor walking through this event in history where lots of people die and it's just so dark and horrible, it's fantastic. However, I find some of the execution to be a little bit off-putting, and I also think the introduction of Dodo at the end of the story really spoils this brilliant moment where the First Doctor is grieving and looking back and being sad about all his companions leaving him. But yeah, overall, really like the Massacre anyway. And then we get to the Ark. The Ark. The Ark is an interesting one. See, it's popular because of the cliffhanger, I think. The first 2 episodes are sort of its own story, and then the middle cliffhanger flips it on his head so that the monoids are in control of the humans instead of the other way around. It's sort of like it's a decent commentary piece on slavery. However, I find the dialogue in this story to be really, really bad. I don't think that the Ark is a particularly intelligent story. I think the majority of the Hartnell era has some really, really, really smart, intelligent sci-fi elements to it. However, I feel like this is the exception. I think the Ark is quite a poor executed story, but I guess the monoids are kind of cool. And then after that is the Celestial Toymaker. I've already touched on that, so then we'll move on to the next one, which is the Gunfighters. Now, the Gunfighters is an infamous story. At the time, it got a massively negative reception, and I can sort of see why. However, I love the Gunfighters. Such an enjoyable, cheesy spaghetti western with the First Doctor. I mean, I think Hartnell is absolutely brilliant in this story. I love the dentist scene. It's so funny. And just Stephen Taylor having to sing. And it's got a great shootout as well, and I think the characters are really fun. It's just a really enjoyable story. I think it's quite underrated, actually. Gunfighters, awesome. After that is the Savages. Not much to say. I guess it's Stephen Taylor's exit story, but I don't know. It's quite atmospheric for a missing story, but I don't know. I don't find the Savages that enjoyable. In fact, it's one of my least favourite Hartnell stories. If it was found, maybe I'll like it more, but it feels very, very just sort of routine. And then we get to the Season 3 finale, one of my favourite Hartnell stories, The War Machines. The War Machines it's very much in the vein of the Pertwee era. It's sort of like an early version of it, but it's absolutely awesome. It's such a slick, fast-paced story. It's very watchable. It's such an enjoyable, it's a great introduction for Ben and Polly. They're great in this story. Yeah, see, the War Machines, it's so good. I love the War Machines, so much fun. I enjoy this story as much as the Hartnell Dalek stories. It's just so magical and fun and enjoyable. Just absolutely great Doctor Who. Classic stuff. And then we get to season 4, another missing story, The Smugglers. Okay, The Smugglers, easily my least favourite Hartnell story by far. It's appalling. Just it's just a really simple idea, plotted over 4 episodes. It's not good. I don't like The Smugglers at all. There's like barely anything about it that I can even stomach. It's just so boring. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if it was found, I might forgive it more, but I did not like The Smugglers at all. And then we get the First Doctor's last story. And also the introduction of the Cybermen, the 10th planet. Now, you could argue that the plot for this story isn't that great because the regular cast aren't that involved in the story. It just sort of happens. However, what I love the most about the 10th planet is it plays out as if it's like real life. I've always found that the 10th planet is one of those stories that I can enjoy because it just sort of it feels like real time and the atmosphere is amazing and the way that the Cybermen are conceptualized is just creepy and scary and just everything about this story is just, it's smooth and it flows. And even though it is the First Doctor's last story and he doesn't have much of a presence, seeing him cripple down and die, it's less fantasy than the other regenerations. I feel like the First Doctor's last hurrah plays out very much like it would in real life. He felt like the death of the First Doctor felt like something that you would see from a human. It was very realistic, of course, because it was real life reasons. But yeah, in a way, it's kind of like this episode's charm is that it almost feels like it's breaking the fourth wall and it's foreshadowing the future of the show. It's just an absolutely extraordinary moment in television, I think, and the idea of the Doctor regenerating is just brilliant. And yeah, this story is monumental to the history of the show, to be honest, and I think it'll always deserve praise for that. And yeah, personally, I love the 10th Planet. I watched it last year on Christmas Day and before the Christmas special, and yeah, so good, so enjoyable. And that does it for the First Doctor's era, so now we move on to the Second Doctor. Of course, starting with the power of the Daleks. I recently rewatched this story, actually. First time I watched it, took me a few goes to get into it. I think the animation is a bit dodgy. It's a bit rough around the edges. However, this is a brilliant beginning for the Second Doctor. The main thing to take away from the Second Doctor's first story is actually the Dalek itself. The fact that there is one Dalek and it is so devious, and the way it manages to manipulate an entire base of people is just absolutely unbelievable. Added on with the fact that it's Patrick Troughton's first story as the Doctor, and what you get is magic. I think this story would be dynamite if it was recovered. In animation form, it's still very good, but it's just not. I don't think it is the same as what it would be. However, I still think it's a classic. It's still a great story. Love Power of the Daleks. Then after that, of course, we have the Highlanders, which is a missing story. Not the biggest fan of the Highlanders. I know some people like it, but it's just not my cup of tea. Again, similar to the Mythmakers, it's kind of the humour that's off-putting for me. For me, it's the story where I find Patrick Troughton the least enjoyable. He's just very, very pantomime and silly. And quite often I can enjoy that, but I feel like just the way it's done in the Highlanders, it's not for me. Not a big fan of the Highlanders, but it's nice to have an introduction story for Jamie. And then, of course, after that, we have the absolutely insane Underwater Menace. Oh my god, what a fucking crazy story. The fact that there is this mad scientist who wants to end the world for the achievement. Nothing can stop me now. What the fuck. This story is crazy. A lot of people say this is one of the worst DVD releases, if not the worst, just because A, it's not a great story, and B, it was supposed to be animated, but it wasn't. The first and last episode are tele snaps, and they're really, really bad. However, you know, there is a sort of guilty pleasure, enjoyable factor to the Underwater Menace, but overall, it's quite poor. I don't think it's very good. I was left quite disappointed after spending quite a little bit of money on it, to be honest. Yeah, Underwater Menace, you don't really have to watch that if you don't want to. It's quite skippable. However, that is followed up by the Moon Base, the second Cyberman story. I absolutely love the Moon Base. I think out of all the stories up to this point, it's probably my favorite. I mean, Power of the Daleks is awesome, and I love the Time Meddler as well, but the Moon Base is just one of the most atmospheric stories of all time. I think it used to be quite underrated. Now, since the DVD release, it's got quite a bit more recognition. But honestly, the Moon Base, the animation, I think is probably the best. It's at its best in this one. I think this episode is when the second Doctor really comes into his own as the Doctor. It's absolutely awesome from start to finish. I love almost everything about this story. I mean, I guess there's a couple of objective things that might hold it back, and it's not as thrilling as some other episodes are. But honestly, Moonbase, it's such a great episode to watch. I absolutely love the Moonbase. And then following up that, I'll just take this one out because we don't need it for now. After that is the Macroterror, which is a missing story. I think the Macroterror is quite underrated. I sort of see it in the same vein as I see the Faceless Ones, just a really enjoyable story. Quite atmospheric, and the Macro are a cool villain. I don't get why the Macroterror doesn't get enough recognition, maybe because it's missing, but I think the Macroterror is really cool. Of course, we get the Faceless Ones and Evil of the Daleks, which I've already covered, which takes us on to Season 5, opening up with the Tomb of the Cybermen. Oh my god, I mean, what hasn't already been said about the Tomb of the Cybermen? For me, it's the first perfect Doctor Who story in terms of like I would give this a 10 out of 10. It's fucking awesome. I love the Tomb of the Cybermen, such a magical story. I know objectively, like, I can see why someone would say it's not great, just because in an objective point of view, it's just not like that great of a story. But honestly, like, that is all thrown out of the way because the magic of Tomb of the Cybermen overrides any objective flaws. It's a slick, fun, magical, enjoyable story. The second Doctor wins me over so much in this story. He's just such a warm figure. Just everything about this story is so enjoyable. It's so complete. It's just classic Doctor Who. And I would say that the Time Meddler, for its time, would have been a 10, but considering how much Doctor Who we've had since and how much blow-away Doctor Who there is out there, I would say this is the first 10. Right. After Tomb of the Cybermen, obviously we have the Abominable Snowman, which I've already covered. And then we have the Ice Warriors. Now, this story, I went into it with quite low expectations because I heard some relatively negative opinions on this story. However, I really enjoyed it. It's such a classic story, you know? It's just your usual trout and monster story, really, and that's a good thing in my opinion. I found this a really enjoyable watch from start to finish, honestly, and I can't see why people don't like it. I think it's really underrated. I really like the Ice Warriors. Brilliant design, it's just a classic story. It's just your classic Doctor Who story. I don't get what the fuss is about it, why people don't like it. I think the Ice Warriors is awesome. And that's all I gotta say, really. Brilliant story. Of course, that is followed up by The Enemy of the World, which was recovered in 2013. Obviously, Patrick Troughton playing the Doctor and Salamander. Absolutely brilliant double performance. Patrick Troughton makes this story what it is. It is a classic. I love The Enemy of the World. David Whittaker, one of the greatest character writers in the show's history. It's literally a James Bond espionage done on Doctor Who. The production is great. I love this story. It's so good. Enemy of the World is a classic. And then, that is followed up by a story that I love even more, The Web of Fear. Obviously, this is the introduction of Brigadier in this story, and this is a sequel to The Abominable Snowman, and this story really capitalizes on that big time. The Yeti are even more scary here. The fact that we get a recurring character from Abominable Snowman coming back older is just brilliant. Oh my god, Unit as well is fantastic. Yeah, The Web of Fear is a classic. I love The Web of Fear. I mean, Season 5 in general is awesome, but The Web of Fear, yeah, it's just so good. Probably, I mean, on an objective level, it's probably the best of Season 5, even though I like Tomb of the Cybermen more, personally, but Web of Fear, absolutely classic story. Unbelievable, so good. I love the ending as well, it's just so good. One of the most atmospheric Doctor Who stories of all time, possibly even the most. The underground tunnels they're just so good. Oh, it's great how these were recovered. These two stories were recovered back in 2013. It's really added a lot to the Doctor Who mythos. Obviously, after Web of Fear, we have Fury from the Deep, which is a missing story. I've only seen the first episode or two, but it's so atmospheric. I need to finish it sometime. Fury from the Deep is great. Great introduction to the sonic screwdriver as well. Really scary scenes, just thumping soundtrack too. And obviously I've already covered The Wheel in Space, which brings us to Season 6 with The Dominators. Well, not sure when this is being uploaded, if it's before or after we react to this, but yeah. I don't want to spoil my full thoughts on this because I'll leave that for the review, but essentially, The Dominators is a complete pile of shit. And I'll put that back. That is followed up by, of course, The Mind Robber, which is we discussed on our experimental episodes video. The Mind Robber is brilliant. I love it. It's such a crazy story. So much wacky, weird stuff happens. Yeah, it's just so wild, so brilliant. The fact that this was made on such a low budget and they experimented is just awesome. Mind Robber is what Doctor Who is all about. Making something out of whatever you can find, and just... It's such a charming story, Mind Robber. It's a real showcase of the talent of the time. And of course, that is followed up by... The Invasion. Probably my favourite Cyberman story of all time. I mean, it's not my favourite portrayal of the Cybermen. I think the more zombie-like Mondasian Cybermen were better, but in terms of a story that has the Cybermen in it, this is gotta be my favourite. Oh my god, 10 out of 10. This story is an absolute classic. It's an 8-part, but it never gets boring. It is sublime from start to finish. I really appreciate the animation as well. It's sort of done in like a Samurai Jack style animation. It was done in 2005, which is a long time ago. And yeah, The Invasion, it's a classic and brings back Brigadier and Unit in such a great way. Just everything about this story fits together nicely. It's one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time. The Invasion, it's classic. It's so good. And of course, that's followed up by The Crotons, which I have not seen. But it is on the worst list. The worst of Classic Who list, The Crotons. The first story for Robert Holmes, which is, if it is that bad, that's disappointing. However, I'm looking forward to watching this one because I've got a feeling I might not dislike it as much as some people do, but we'll see. Crotons seems interesting. Now we get to a story that I have not seen for years. The Seeds of Death. It's the second Ice Warrior story, and this time they are a lot more deadly than they are the first time. It's been ages since I've seen this story, probably about 5 years, but I remember really enjoying it. It's quite a thrilling, dark story. Yeah, I can't say much about it beyond that, but I just remember really enjoying it. Very high death count, actually. Yeah, so I guess I'll have to give that a rewatch at some point. Of course, after that is the Space Pirates, which we've already covered. And then we get to the last story for Patrick Troughton, the Season 6 finale. The finale of the 60s. The War Games. Quite possibly my favourite Doctor Who story of all time. This is a 10-parter It introduces the Time Lords into Doctor Who, reveals who the Doctor is. He regenerates. It's just epic. The plot, the characters, the way it moves. It's a 10-parter, but it's never boring. It's as smooth as bloody butter. It's so good. Everything about this story is epic to every extent. The second Doctor is unbelievable in this story. I just can't praise it enough. It is, in my opinion, it is perfect Doctor Who. 4 hours of perfect Doctor Who. It doesn't get better than the War Games, in my opinion. It is absolutely outstanding. And the second Doctor could have not asked for a better send-off. Now, we get on to the third Doctor era, starting with Spearhead from Space by Robert Holmes. John Pertwee's opening... Oh, there we go. John Pertwee's opening story. I mean, what hasn't already been said about Spearhead from Space? It's a classic. Introduction of the Autons, introduction of the third Doctor and Liz. They brought back Una as a full-time part of the story. I mean, Spearhead from Space. It's such a great story. It's, for me, this is the ultimate way to begin a Doctor's era. It just doesn't get better than this. This is the perfect opener to any Doctor. I mean, Power of the Daleks is pretty good too, but like, Spearhead from Space is just, it's ideal. It's ideal opener for a Doctor. And it's absolutely brilliant. I love Spearhead from Space. It's a story that I can just watch over and over and never get sick of. It's just a classic. Everything about Spearhead from Space. It's slick. It looks great. The fact that they filmed it all on film as well is absolutely awesome. I love Spearhead from Space. Classic story. And it'll be great, perfect beginning to the John Pertwee era. Of course, that is followed up by, if I can get it out, Doctor Who and the Silurians. I haven't actually seen this story yet. Out of all the stories that I haven't seen, this is probably the most famous one. Because I've been told that this is an absolute classic. And I can see why. The Silurians is an absolutely brilliant idea. And, you know, Season 7 has a great reputation as being one of the best ever, if not the best. And it looks like a cracking story. I mean, it's classic Pertwee era Doctor Who. And I'm sure I will get around to watching this at some point and hopefully doing a review on it. That'll be great. But yeah, Doctor Who and the Silurians, I haven't seen it, but it sounds awesome. Of course, that is followed up by The Ambassadors of Death, which I haven't seen either. However, I've heard that this one is... It's a bit of a mixed opinion people have on this one. However, it is often regarded as very good. It seems like a kind of sort of sci-fi James Bond story done in Doctor Who. Lots of writers on this one, Jesus Christ. But yeah, it seems really cool, Ambassadors of Death. I definitely will have to give this a watch. This is one of my favourite DVD covers, actually. I think it's sort of an iconic Pertwee shot, and with these guys in the background, it just looks awesome. And then, of course, Season 7 is ended with the 7-part epic that is Inferno. My God, Inferno. I've only seen this once, and the first time I watched it, I was not really in the mood for Classic Who. So this is quite a plodding experience for someone who's not in the mood for a long story. However, what hasn't already been said about Inferno? It's absolutely outstanding. The third Doctor goes to a parallel universe, meets Brigade leader Lethbridge Stewart. Just everything turns to hell. The fact that in this parallel universe things go down. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's so brilliant. But just like the fact that this all takes place in a parallel universe, it's just so crazy and awesome. Just everything about Inferno is just on fire. Literally on fire. Yeah, if you haven't seen this and you're wanting to get into some Pertwee, this is a good way to start. Inferno is a classic story. And then this is followed up by the opener to Season 8, The Terror of the Autons. Return of the Autons from Spearhead from Space, and of course, the debut of the Master, played by Roger Delgado. I haven't actually seen Terror of the Autons. I've watched clips from it, but I haven't actually seen the story in full. Oh, it's the introduction of Joe Grant too, so quite a monumental story. I mean, anything written by Robert Holmes is monumental, really. Yeah, I've heard things about this story. I definitely need to give it a watch at some point, but it seems awesome. Terror of the Autons, can't say much more than that. However, a story that I have seen is The Mind of Evil, I believe written by the same guy who did Inferno, yep, Don Houghton. Mind of Evil, my god. Probably, out of all the episodes from Roger Delgado I've seen, it's probably my favourite. It's just awesome. Smoking cigars in the back of a cab, just so cool. The mental war games played in this episode, just the sort of psychological drama is fantastic. The way that the Master and the Doctor bounce off each other. The fact that there's this machine that sort of acts like a... if any of you have seen Harry Potter, it's kind of like a boggart. It shows you what you fear. The fact that the Master fears the Doctor standing over him is just... It's such a great insight to the character. Mind of Evil is... It's fantastic. It's just a classic Pertwee story. It's just what you get from Pertwee era, that classic sort of James Bond-esque sci-fi story. It's just... I love Mind of Evil. Fantastic story. Fantastic political drama as well. And then we move on to the next row, where we have The Claws of Axos. I have not seen The Claws of Axos. I don't know if I can say anything about it, so best move on to the next one. Colony in Space, which we covered on our channel in a reaction and review as part of the Worst Of series, and by God was I surprised by this. This was actually a really enjoyable story with the Master and this colony on this planet. It's a really underrated story. I mean, there are aspects to it that are a bit naff, but look, it's so much fun to watch. I just enjoy this story. If you want to hear more opinions on this story, go check out our video on Colony in Space. It's just so fun. Such a great story. I mean, it's not an all-time classic by any means, but it's fun. It's just a fun story. And now we have the Demons, or the Daemons, or however you say it. Okay. How do I say it? The Demons is considered by a lot of people to be one of the greatest Pertwee stories, and I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen it in 5 years. I may need to rewatch it, but I didn't find it all that enjoyable, to be honest. It just felt a bit off to me. I mean, I never really thought that the Letts era could... I don't think the Letts era really suits gothic horror. It just seems like a strange mishmash of style, but at the same time, I mean, I guess it's enjoyable to agree. I do need to rewatch the story, though, because there's a lot that I've forgotten from it. It's kind of a precursor to the Weeping Angels in a way, to some degree, but yeah, the Demons, definitely need to give it a rewatch at some point. And then we start Season 9 with Day of the Daleks, the return of the Daleks since Evil, which has been, 5 seasons since? Yeah, it's been about 5 seasons. This one has quite a mixed reaction. Some people really don't like this story. It's quite a timey-wimey story, and it definitely feels like a story that didn't originally have the Daleks in it, and they were shoehorned in. I'm sure there's some truth to that. But I actually found it quite enjoyable. It's not my favourite Dalek story or anything, but I just really enjoyed watching it, to be honest. I don't really see why it's so hated, I guess. I don't know. The concept in it may not be for everyone. But, you know, enjoyable. Of course, that is followed up by The Curse of Peladon, which is a story I have not seen, but I'm sure I will at some point. The Curse of Peladon seems like a very political story. It's got quite a mixed reaction from fans. I know that there's a lot of people out there that do really like it, though. It's of course the debut of Alpha Centauri. I'm intrigued to see what happens when I watch this one eventually, because it seems interesting. It seems like the kind of story that I haven't really seen before, and that's always exciting. And that, of course, is followed up by The Sea Devils. Now, The Sea Devils, but to a lot of people, is sort of just a copy and paste of the Silurians, except this time it has the Master in it, and it's shorter. I have not seen The Sea Devils, however, it sounds like a lot of fun, so I'm sure at some point I'll definitely have to watch The Sea Devils. It looks like it's got a really cool sort of vibe to it. That's one thing I could say with The Sea Devils, but yeah, it's got a bit of a mixed reaction, Sea Devils, so it'll be interesting to see what that's all about when I get to it. And of course, the next story is The Mutants, which I have heard is one of the worst Pertwee stories. Basically, I mean, I haven't seen it, but from what I've heard, it's a very plodding story. I don't know. I've heard some things about the production, how it's real cheap and bad looking, and the pace is horrible. 6 parts too much for this story, but I guess we'll have to see when we get up to it in the worst of series how it fares. But by the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like that much of an enjoyable story. And then that is followed up by, hang on, just pull it out first. Then put that back there. Ooh. That is followed up by another controversial story, The Time Monster, which I haven't seen either. Similar to The Mutants, this one is criticised for its production and its pace, but unlike The Mutants, this one isn't hated necessarily because people say it's boring. People say that the problem with The Time Monster is it's literally just a bunch of waffle. It is just a horribly weird story. However, some people say it's a bit of a guilty pleasure. I don't know. It's on the worst of list, so when we get up to it in that series, I'll give it a deeper analysis. But yeah, it sounds a bit crazy. Of course, that leads into season 10, the 10th anniversary season with The Three Doctors. My God, Three Doctors is a great story. I love it. First anniversary story, does such a good job. It's a shame that Hartnell couldn't be more involved because he was quite ill, but his what he offers anyway is still fun, and Troughton and Pertwee is enough to entertain for a whole story, and Omega is such an awesome idea for a villain. Three Doctors is just a classic story. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it in a few years, but like it just sticks with you. The way that it's such a great anniversary story. Just this idea of bringing the Doctors together is such a great idea, and I love how this story is set up for more multi-Doctor stories that we've seen in the past. And yeah, I will always respect the Three Doctors. It was, I mean, I guess the plot's not the most complex thing ever, but it's so enjoyable to watch. I think this is such a fun story, and such a great way to start season 10. Of course, that is followed up by Carnival of Monsters, which is a comedy Pertwee story, which you don't get a lot of. I haven't seen this story in about 5 years, but I do remember really enjoying it. I mean, not to the same extent as, say, The Three Doctors, but it felt like a fun story. I know this one has a very mixed reaction with a lot of people. It's a Bob Holmes comedy. I'll definitely have to rewatch this at some point. Carnival of Monsters, yeah, for another day. Of course, this is followed up by Roger Delgado's last story as the Master before he was sadly killed in a car accident. And this is Frontier in Space, which, disappointing again, I have not seen, but it sounds really interesting. Sounds like a lot of people say it's quite an underrated story, but it sounds like this great big epic space adventure, which will be great. I'm sure at some point I'll get around to watching this one. It sounds great. Really looking forward to it. Apparently this is one of Peter Capaldi's favourites, so I trust him. Of course, this is followed up by Planet of the Daleks. Again, like Day of the Daleks, quite a controversial one. A lot of the Pertwee Dalek stories are quite controversial. They mixed reviews with fans, but some people say this is kind of a lazy Terry Nation story, just sort of a mishmash of the previous Dalek stories, a bit of fanwank, for the 10th anniversary season. But I've heard opposite opinions to that. I've heard some people say it's really enjoyable. So, yeah, I haven't seen this story, so I can't comment on it. But I've heard some mixed things about it. And then we get to, of what I've seen, my favourite John Pertwee story, The Green Death, Season 10 finale. I absolutely love this story. Amazing send-off for Joe Grant, and it really feels like an end of an era in this story. The Green Death is just so good. The maggots are cool. Just an enjoyable story from start to finish. This is almost in a sort of way. It's sort of like it's like the Pertwee version of the Dalek invasion of Earth, in the sense that it's this epic story that sends off a companion, and it's this because like the Dalek invasion of Earth was sort of the magical Hartnell era vibe, whereas this is the the Pertwee era vibe, which just has unit and it has like an economic problem and it's got lots of technology in it. It's such a complete story, and John Pertwee in this story is amazing. Yeah, I love the Green Death, everything about it, start to finish, brilliant story. Fills out 6 parts really well, and yeah, so far easily my favourite Pertwee story. And of course, now we get to season 11 with The Time Warrior, another classic. Introduction of Sarah Jane Smith, introduction of the Sontarans, first story of season 11, introduces a new title sequence, and of course written by the amazing Robert Holmes. I mean, pretty much anything by Robert Holmes is groundbreaking, to be honest. This story is awesome. It's such a classic story. It's just one of those memorable ones. It's just anything that Robert Holmes seems to write for the show is goes down in history as classic. I mean, The Time Warrior, Lynx is such an awesome Sontaran. I just enjoy pretty much everything about this story. So good. So good. And then that is followed up by Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which I haven't seen. However, I have heard that Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a story that is really great, but the issue is the dinosaurs. The actual models of the dinosaurs are a bit cute, but I've heard from a lot of Pertwee fans that this is quite an underrated story by Malcolm Hulke, who I have said before is one of my favourite Doctor Who writers, so I'm sure I will enjoy getting around to this one because it looks like the kind of thing I would enjoy. Invasion of the Dinosaurs, sort of a surreal one by the looks of it, but yeah, I am looking forward to eventually when we get around to this. Not sure when, but yeah, it seems like such a cool story. And of course we get Death to the Daleks, another controversial one. I mean, all the Pertwee Dalek stories are controversial. This one is mainly because it's a sort of a comedy Dalek story, and it has this really controversial musical track to it as well by Carrie Blyton. I haven't seen this story, but I've heard it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm not sure what to say about it really, but by the looks of it, it does look like an enjoyable story, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And then we have The Monster of Peladon. And this is on our worst Classic Who list, so shall be interesting when we get to this. Obviously, this is a sequel to The Curse of Peladon. I've heard that this one's a bit crap, but yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Monster of Peladon, not sure what to say about it at this point. And then, of course, the finale of the Pertwee era, Planet of the Spiders, which I have not seen. But yeah, it's Planet of the Spiders. By the sounds of it, it's really enjoyable. It's not the greatest Doctor Who story of all time, but I've heard that for Pertwee's Last, they do a really good job of sending him off in a heroic way, which is quite cool, and I am looking forward to when we get around to doing Planet of the Spiders. It seems like the kind of thing that would be fun and nice send-off of the Pertwee era. So yeah, that is the third Doctor, and of course that is followed up by the fourth Doctor. Of course, that now brings us to the Tom Baker era, starting with season 12, and we have Robot. Robot was one of the first classic stories I saw. In fact, it may have even been the first. Yeah, I got this DVD from a friend, and yeah, it's a real nostalgic one for this. I love Robot. It's a very cheesy Barry Letts style story in quite a dark season, but man, Robot is just so much fun. Tom Baker being Tom Baker makes this story, it's so much fun. It's just, I mean, that's what the story's all about, really. You know, I mean, the plot's objectively not that great, but just Tom Baker being Tom Baker is what makes Robot so much fun. Of course, this is followed up, and now we begin the Hinchcliffe era, one of the most popular eras of the show. Some consider it to even be the golden era. And I can't necessarily disagree. I love the Hinchcliffe era, and it all begins with the Ark in Space, which is just so good. It's one of my favourite Tom Baker stories. Ark in Space is a classic. Oh my god, everything about this story is so enjoyable. It's one of the most watchable Doctor Who stories. From start to finish, just so much fun, written by Robert Holmes. The simplicity of it is just great. It's just Doctor Who defined, really. Yeah, I absolutely adore Ark in Space. Go watch it if you haven't. It's fucking awesome. That is followed up by the Sontaran Experiment, a 2-part story. This one has quite a mixed reaction, but I really like it. I think it's a really fun story. Just a bit of an experimental Sontaran story. It's just a bit of fun, really. I mean, objectively, I guess I can see why someone would say it's not great, but look, I just really enjoy Sontaran Experiment. It's just a bit of fun. A bit of a bumper for the season 12. And then, of course, we get to the mighty genesis of the Daleks, often considered to be one of the greatest stories of all time, if not the greatest. And some other people will say it's a bit overrated. So here's my deal with Genesis of the Daleks. As a piece of television, right? 6 parts is too long, right? It is a story that is too long, and it's padded, and it has filler scenes in it. However, the bottom line is, what this story does for this show is more than what any other story I think has ever done. I mean, I guess you could go back to the Hartnell era and argue that the origins of some other stuff is more important, but for me, Genesis of the Daleks is essential to Doctor Who's lore and canon. It's just such a iconic piece of television for me, and I mean, it's just like, it's such an amazing accomplishment, the fact that this is going back to where it all began, and it's creating a backstory for how the Daleks were created, and Davros is just one of the greatest villains of all time. Genesis of the Daleks, undeniable classic. It's just such a historic piece of television. Of course, this is then followed up by Revenge of the Cybermen, which some people consider to be the absolute drizzling shits. And I don't. I actually really enjoy it. Whilst it's definitely the weakest of season 12, I actually consider this to be quite an underrated story. In the sense that it's not that great objectively, but it's a really fun run-around shoot-'em-up story, and the dynamic between Tom Baker, Sarah Jane, and Harry Sullivan's really fun in this one. It's just a nice sort of fluffy story to end season 12. I don't get why it gets so much hate. I mean, obviously it's not the greatest thing ever, but Revenge of the Cybermen, fun story. Now we get to season 13, with Terror of the Zygons. Once again, another classic story. Very memorable. Zygons are a great villain. It's just such a great story. It's so thrilling, and just the design of the Zygon spaceships is just so cool, and everything about Terror of the Zygons I just enjoy. I would say in some regards it probably gets a little bit too much, like it gets a bit more credit than it deserves. However, at the end of the day, it is still a great story. I can see it for its flaws, but look, it's just classic Hinchcliffe era fun. And then we've followed that up by Planet of Evil. Similar to Revenge of the Cybermen, this story gets a bit of flack, but I quite enjoy this one. I mean, it's not the greatest thing ever, but I really like the concept of it. The fact that it has this antimatter creature on this wild alien planet. I think the best part of this story is the setting. The alien planet on this story is really cool, and yeah, I don't. Again, similar to Revenge of the Cybermen, I don't get why this one gets so much flack. It's such a good story. It's not like a phenomenal classic or anything, but it's just enjoyable. It's a really enjoyable sci-fi. However, speaking of historic classics, Pyramids of Mars. Oh my god. I mean, what hasn't already been said about this story? Pyramids of Mars is an all-time classic. Sutekh, one of the scariest villains of all time, not just Doctor Who, but such an intimidating figure. And this is a great story for Tom Baker and Sarah Jane. Just the character development with them is unbelievable. And it says it's written by Stephen Harris, but it's actually written by Robert Holmes and some other guy, I can't remember his name. But, you know, I think some people said that they find this overrated because there's a bit of running around with the mummies. But, look, I just find this an absolutely extraordinary watch from start to finish. Pyramids of Mars, it's brilliant. It's sort of like the trademark Hinchcliffe era story. I mean, what else can I say? 10 out of 10. Fucking awesome. I love Pyramids of Mars. And then it's followed up by The Android Invasion. I mean, it's not crap by any means. It's very competent. I would say that. Android Invasion's a very competent story. But it is easily my least favourite of the Hinchcliffe era. Terry Nation wrote a very lazy script with this one. This story feels like it just feels like a rip-off of Terror of the Zygons. On top of that, you've got this attempted side plot that there's a whole bunch of androids and they don't know it, but I don't know, the way the story plays out, everything is too predictable, and it's just a whole bunch of scenes that are a bit crap, you know. Android Invasion, it did disappoint me, but it is a competent story. I wouldn't say it's anywhere near crap, but it's definitely my least favourite of the Hinchcliffe era. And then we get The Brain of Morbius, which is quite a polarizing story. I find that this is sort of the point in the Hinchcliffe era that indulges the most in the gothic horror that it likes to adventure with. But whilst I can see why people would have lots of flaws with this story, I actually really enjoy it. I actually think it's a really, really, really good story, and whilst not perfect, I think it really captures the essence of the Hinchcliffe era. And I find Morbius, even though like some people really don't like the design, I find the design really scary, and the whole backstory with the Time Lords and the Sisterhood of Khan I think is really good lore for the show. Again, Robin Bland. This is a mix-up between Terrence Dicks and Robert Holmes, which are two essential Doctor Who writers. Yeah, Brain of Morbius, I mean, there are some stuff that you could fix to make it even better, but I still, in its own right, I still really enjoy Brain of Morbius. I think it's quite good. And then we get the Seeds of Doom. Oh my god, the Seeds of Doom is a classic. I love this story. It's so good. Everything about the Seeds of Doom is amazing. First 2 episodes are sort of its own story at the South Pole, then the next 4 parts is sort of like a follow-up to that with its own plot. 6 parts fly by. It's such a thrilling story. One of my favourite Tom Baker stories. Seeds of Doom is an absolute classic. Absolutely love it. One of my favourite villains in it as well, the guy who owns the plants. Just, so good. So good. Now we start season 14 with The Mask of Mandragora. This one seems to get a bit of a mixed reaction with fans, similar to Planet of Evil and Revenge of the Cybermen. Mask of Mandragora. It's not necessarily my cup of tea, however, I do find it very enjoyable. It's a nice mix of weird alien sci-fi mixed with historical, and I think, similar to The Brain of Morbius, this story plays up the gothic horror elements really well, and this time it's more of a religious setting, you know, like the actual, like the fact that the people in this story are praying and worshipping this helix. It's quite a crazy story, really. But, you know, one of my friends actually really liked this one, and I can see why. It's quite an enjoyable gothic horror. Not my favourite, but I do enjoy it. I think some of the acting is really good in this too. It's a bit of an underrated one to some regard. And then we have The Hand of Fear, which is Sarah Jane's last story before she returned later. I have mixed feelings on this one. The first half of it I think is really good. It's just over time I feel like the story sort of devolves a bit, and by the time it gets to episode 4 it starts getting a bit strange. And yeah, the last episode, it's not great. Aside from the Sarah Jane exit, that's really good, but Hand of Fear, mixed feelings. Definitely my least favourite of season 14, but it's still a decent story. Pretty good overall. And then we have The Deadly Assassin, which we covered in the experimental episodes video, and oh my god, The Deadly Assassin is a classic. I mean, the Doctor goes to Gallifrey and fights inside the Matrix with the Mars to resurrect it. He's undead. It's just, this story by Robert Holmes is just absolutely outstanding. I mean, there's a couple of flaws that I have with it, but overall, it's just so good. Such a scary story. Everything about Deadly Assassin is just amazing. And then we get The Face of Evil. This episode, objectively, is quite crap. However, I really enjoy it, not only for Leela's introduction, not only for the cool imagery, and the weird contrast between the settings in it, but the biggest reason why I love The Face of Evil is Tom Baker. He is absolutely hilariously charming in this story. Tom Baker makes it so worth it. Face of Evil, I mean, I can see why someone wouldn't like it, but look, I just really enjoy watching it. So much fun. And that is, of course, followed up by the classic, The Robots of Death. Oh my god, this is like Agatha Christie done on Doctor Who. I mean, it's just a classic. What hasn't already been said about Robots of Death? Just a lovely sort of murder mystery, and yeah, it's so good. Just a really enjoyable story, start to finish. Can't say anything negative about it, really. It's just really fun. Maybe not my favourite of the Tom Baker era, but I just really enjoy it anyway. It's kind of hard to define between them because Tom Baker era is just full of classic stories. And then we get the finale of the Hinchcliffe era, The Talons of Wang Chiang. Oh my god, I love The Talons of Wang Chiang. Such a wholesome, enjoyable 6-part story. I mean, yes, it's very racist, but look, this story is just amazing. Everything about it. It's similar, in a similar light to Genesis of the Daleks, maybe not so much, but in a similar light. This story sort of represents it, really creates this sort of anchor points in Doctor Who history, just these very memorable stories that has such an impact on the lore. And the fact that Jago and Lightfoot have so many box sets following from this is a showing of how popular this story was. Talons of Wang Chiang it's an absolute classic. I love it. And then we start the Williams era, and that is started by another classic, Horror of Fang Rock. The first time I watched this story, I didn't get it. I thought it was quite boring, but then the second time I watched it, I was in a different mood, and oh my god, this is a classic. I love this story. One of the most atmospheric stories of all time, and the comedy in this story is so well balanced by the horror. Just such a brilliant, classic story. This really is peak Tom Baker. Just following off the Hinchcliffe era, we have another story that's just so brilliant, written by Terrence Dicks. It's just so good. Horror of Fang Rock, brilliant story. And then we move down to the second row for Tom Baker. This is where things start to get a little bit mixed. I find that after this point, the Tom Baker era, it's still good, but it's not the same. I'm a big fan of the Hinchcliffe era, and I think it's sort of this point where it gets a little bit... it's not bad or anything, but I'll get onto each individual story. We start with The Invisible Enemy. I really didn't like this one, to be honest. The Nucleus is one of the ugliest Doctor Who villains of all time. It's just absolutely rotten and disgusting, and I hate watching it. It's a nice introduction for K9, though, which is kind of cool, but I really didn't like some of the comedy elements in this episode. I feel like the change of tone from the Hinchcliffe to Williams era is really noticeable in this episode. Production is really pastel, and it's just... you can just see how much cheaper it is now. I don't know, it's alright. Like, it's watchable enough, but just like... I'm not a fan of The Invisible Enemy. I just find it not an enjoyable one to watch. And then we get Image of the Fendal. Okay, Image of the Fendal is an enjoyable gothic horror story. Sort of in the same vein of like Mask of Mandragora, those gothic stories. The thing is, this one feels like... I don't know how to describe it. The atmosphere is very strange. Feels like it's sort of missing something. It's got quite a hollow structure to it. It's quite an empty, ghost-like feeling story. I guess that may be part of the point, though, but it is enjoyable enough for the gothic elements, but nothing to write home about. I mean, it is good, but it doesn't compare to some of the other Tom Baker stuff. And then we get The Sun Makers by Bob Holmes, which is a lovely sort of political satire. I think it's quite an underrated story, actually. I mean, I guess it sort of depends on your taste, really. It's really, really pantomime and takes the piss out of capitalism and whatnot, so I guess for some people it's not their cup of tea, but I find this quite an entertaining story, to be honest. I think it's quite underrated, and some of the metaphors in this are really funny, and I don't know. I guess some people would say that this is kind of preachy, but you know, I think it's enjoyable enough. I think Bob Holmes can really get away with anything, to be honest. Wouldn't say it's one of Bob Holmes' best stories, but I find it enjoyable nonetheless. And then we have Underworld. I haven't seen this story. It's on the worst of list. Apparently it's one of the worst stories of all time. Not looking forward to that because it sounds like absolute garbage. Put that back in there. And then we have The Invasion of Time. Another story on the worst of list. This one seems to be less hated. It's sort of more of a divisive story. Sontaran's on Gallifrey and Leela's exit. Yeah, I don't know. From what I've heard, this story seems like it's a bit shaky. Oh god, that looks weird. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to see this story before I can judge it, but it doesn't sound like my cup of tea, really. We'll see. Now we get to the Key to Time era, or sort of the season 16, starting with the Ribos Operation. I've only seen the first 2 episodes of this. It's really fun so far. I really like the dynamic between Tom Baker and Mary Tam. That's really good. And yeah, it just seems like a really enjoyable story. Again, by Robert Holmes. Who would have thought? Yeah, nice start to the Key to Time. Obviously, I haven't finished the story, so I'll have to wait and see how it goes. But yeah, it seems really fun. I like the atmosphere. And then we have... just get this one out here. Now, the second story of the Key to Time is The Pirate Planet by Douglas Adams. I have not seen this story, but I have heard it is absolutely hilarious and just a joy to watch. I'm looking forward to when I get to this one. Sounds like fun. Sounds like an absolutely colourful and lovely and brilliant story. I mean, Douglas Adams is famous for a reason. So yeah, Pirate Planet seems awesome. And then we have The Stones of Blood. Some people say this is the best Key to Time story, whereas other people say it's the worst. I think it's because, for some people, this story, it's like a mix. So it starts out gothic, and then it turns into a more traditional sci-fi, and some people are really turned the wrong way by that, but other people say it's a really cracking story. Looking forward to when I get to it. Stones of Blood seems interesting, seems like my kind of story. And then we have The Androids of Tara. Some people say this is the most underrated Tom Baker story. Obviously, haven't seen it. Romana's costume in this looks really cool. But yeah, Androids of Tara seems like an interesting story. Can't wait to get to it. Can't really comment on it now, but it seems like everyone seems to like this one, so that's good. And then we get The Power of Kroll. This is on our worst of list, so should be coming up soon. Yeah, from what I've heard, this is quite a basic story, which is interesting because it's written by Robert Holmes. And Robert Holmes is quite a good writer. Well, not just quite a good writer, one of the best of all time. But yeah, Power of Kroll seems like quite a basic premise. Big squid monster, you know. It'll be interesting. I think there's a chance I might like this one, considering what I've heard. It's quite a comedic story. And then we have the finale to the Key to Time, The Armageddon Factor, with the Black Guardian there. And it's sort of the introduction to the face of the second Romana, and she would eventually become Romana, that face. Armageddon Factor, from what I've heard, it's... Some people say this is the worst Key to Time story because it's quite a disappointing finale. This is on our worst list, so we will eventually get to it. I'm interested to see where this goes. Yeah, but seems like quite a disappointing end, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now we start season 17 with what some people consider to be the worst Dalek story of all time, Destiny of the Daleks. Very cheap looking. I haven't seen it. Again, it's on our worst list, so we will get to it. But it's obviously the first story for Romana 2, and Davros comes back, and yeah, by the sounds of it, it could be a fun bit of comedy, but at the same time, it could also be not very good. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, going into this one, I've got mixed anticipation, really. And of course, that means we are now up to City of Death. One of the greatest Doctor Who stories. I mean, it's so good. Douglas Adams, it says David Agnew, but it's Douglas Adams. It is absolute best. It's such a fun story. Tom Baker's Doctor and Romana 2 go to Paris, and they just have a lovely time. Just great romp story. It's got Julian Glover in it. Even got a cameo by John Cleese. I remember watching this 5 years ago. I was hooked from start to finish. It's such a fun story. I would say if someone who's only seen New Who is trying to get into classic Who, this is a good one to start on because it's really pacey and fun. It's a fun romp, yeah. City of Death, all-time classic. Then we get to The Creature from the Pit. I haven't seen this story, but it's on our worst of list. I've heard things about it. I've heard that there is a sexual innuendo. And, yeah, that seems interesting. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what this is all about. I've heard it's not very good, but, yeah. I mean, I can't judge it till I've seen it, but it does seem a bit silly, as a lot of the Williams era stuff does. Of course, that now leads us to Nightmare of Eden, which is for our timeline, this is the next one we're going to be doing on the classic worst list. And yeah, it looks really cheap, even on the DVD cover. You've got one of the cast members can be seen. So it's sort of like they're admitting that this one's quite cheap. I mean, yeah, it looks a bit crap, but I'm sure there's a chance that we might have some fun with this one. Obviously, season 17, script edited by Douglas Adams, so we might have fun with this, but I guess we'll have to wait and see, to be honest. And then that leads us to the Horns of Nimon. Again, haven't seen it, but it's on the worst list. I've heard this one's definitely a massive guilty pleasure for some people. Very camp, very pantomime, very over the top. But yeah, from what I've heard, the appeal for the story comes from the fact that it's hilarious. And some people hate it and some people love it, so I guess we'll have to wait and see how I feel about it, because sometimes I can do with a bit of fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this one because it's got quite a mixed reaction, but overall, yeah, it's on our worst list because a lot of people don't like it. So it doesn't say good about season 17, the fact that 4 of them are on our worst list. So oh dear, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And now we have Sharda, the for long time unreleased story, and has been released many versions now. And this is, of course, the animation version that was released recently. And yeah, I haven't seen this story yet, but it sounds really interesting. Looking forward to getting up to it. But yeah, it's nice to sort of complete season 17 with this release, because yeah, I think that was necessary for completionist's sake. Now we get to the John Nathan Turner era with season 18, and oh boy, The Leisure Hive. If you've seen our YouTube channel and you've seen our reaction to this, it's horrible. I mean, I guess it's the first part's sort of fun, but look, this is a garbage story. Bad way to start the 80s. Oh, triggered. I'm just triggered looking at it. I mean, it's not... Okay, admittedly, it's not the worst Doctor Who story of all time, but it's pretty bad. It is pretty bad. Meglos is also on our worst list. So, funny enough, it's got Jacqueline Hill in it. It was a strange time for her to return since being Barbara, but yeah. Meglos, don't know much about it. Seems like a bit of a lame story, but I guess we'll have to wait and see how it goes when we get up to watching it. Now we have the E-Space trilogy, starting with, if we can get it out here, Full Circle, which I believe Andrew Smith... I've heard that this one's written by a teenager. I'd have to confirm by that, but apparently this one's written by a teenager, which is quite impressive. But yeah, I haven't seen this story. It's Eirich's introduction, which is never good. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see for this one. Full Circle, haven't heard much about it. Of course, that is then followed up by State of Decay, which is a Terrence Dicks story, and it was supposed to be done for season 15, I think. Originally, this was going to be in the same spot that Horror Fang Rock was in, so this one's quite a throwback to the early Tom Bakers. I haven't actually seen it, but from what I've heard, it's quite a standout in the sense that it's different to everything else in the season, which is nice. It's sort of nice to have a bit of deviation, but I will have to watch this story to give a full opinion on it. And then, of course, the finale of the E-Space trilogy is Warrior's Gate, which I've heard is one of the most weirdest experimental stories of all time. I've heard it looks great though. The production on it's very white, but I've heard this is quite a weird story. This is of course Romana's exit, which is interesting, but yeah, I'll have to watch this story to get a full opinion on it. But I've heard some mixed things about it. Of course, then we are followed up by The Keeper of Traken, The Return of the Master. Obviously, it is Jeffrey Beavers as the Master, and he returns in this story and he takes over Nissa's father's body. Obviously, this is an introduction story for Nissa, and her father, played by Anthony Ainley, becomes the Master in this story. Obviously, I haven't seen this story, but it sounds like it's interesting. Some people say it's boring, but other people say it's an all-time classic, so I'll be interested to see. It's got quite a mixed reaction, to be honest, so eager to find out what the real deal is on The Keeper of Traken. And then, of course, we get Tom Baker's last story, Legopolis, written by Christopher H. Bidmet. Yay, Technobabble. Obviously, Doctor and the Master. I've seen the regeneration scenes. I've heard about this story. It's quite a timey-wimey, weird mathematical one. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen it, so I can't judge it fully, but it doesn't sound too great. I mean, some people really like it, but, you know, just seems like a bit of a weird, unnecessary, complicated ending for the Fourth Doctor's era. You know, maybe you could have ended his era with something more fitting, like a gothic horror, maybe like State of Decay, for example. Even though I haven't seen it, but it sounds like more like something Tom Baker would be better to end on, but oh well. I'll guess I'll have to watch the story eventually and find out what the real deal is. But yeah, Legopolis looks interesting, but don't know much to say on it at this point. Of course, that ends the Fourth Doctor era, and that leads us to the Fifth Doctor. Starting with Castrovalva. Ooh, come on. There we go. Castrovalva. I have to say, one of the coolest looking covers for a Doctor Who DVD. I have not seen this story, however I have heard about it. Quite a mixed response, I think. Obviously, I think, from what I've heard, the first two episodes sort of take place in the TARDIS, and it's sort of establishing the Fifth Doctor. In the rest of the story, I mean, I haven't seen it, so I can't really make any comments, but yeah, I've heard it's sort of a Marmite one. You either like it or you don't. Looking forward to getting to it, though, eventually. And then we have 4 to Doomsday. This one is on our worst list. Yeah, I haven't seen this story, but I've heard bad things about it. Heard it's quite a boring story. But yeah, well, we will see when we get to it. I'm probably make comment right now. I'm not the biggest fan of Davison's era. I find it to be a little bit boring. Still enjoyable enough, but overall, not a big fan. Kinder. I have not seen the full story of Kinder. We addressed it in our experimental episodes video. Seems interesting, actually. The Mara seemed like a really interesting villain. Obviously, it deals with a lot of Buddhism ideas, and it's quite a surreal story, but can't really make a full comment on it yet, because I haven't seen it all. But I do like the visual elements of the Mara snake. Then we have The Visitation. I have actually seen this one. I heard really good things about it going into it, and then I watched it, and it was alright, I guess. Nothing to write home about. I mean, I guess the historical factor that at the end it starts the fires of London, or whatever it's called. Characters are interesting. It's sort of it's nice to have a bit of a change, though, because this comes after a lot of very sciencey mathematical stories, and this is a historical, so a bit of a change of pace for the Davison era. You know, Eirich Saywood coming into the fold. I mean, it's alright. I enjoy it enough. A little bit disengaging, though. Then we have Black Orchid. Now, this story at the video store when I was a little boy, they had a whole bunch of New Who series DVDs, but they also had Black Orchid. So one day I picked it up, 2 episodes, and watched it on a portable DVD player. So there's a bit of a story there. We discussed this one on our experimental episodes video. Black Orchid obviously being the first pure historical since the Troughton era. I mean, it's been about 10 years since I've seen this story, so I can't make full comments on it, but I do remember it being a bit different. It was enjoyable enough, bit of a gentlemanly episode. We'll have to watch it again at some point, but yeah, there is a certain level of nostalgia I have for this one. I vividly remember the doppelganger plotline, but yeah, Black Orchid, faint memories at best. Ooh. And then of course we get to, God, come on, sorry, bear with me here. And then of course we get to the iconic Earthshock. Earthshock, one of the most popular Cyberman stories. One of the most popular stories of the Davison era. It's just a great story. Eirich Saywood on his best day. I mean, Earthshock is just a classic. It's just such an engaging story, such a fun, dramatic bit of television. Adric's death, spoilers, is fantastic and just such a great idea. It's quite a basic story, but it works. It's so fun. Earthshock is just a classic. The fact that they managed to keep the Cybermen return secret is amazing in that part 1 cliffhanger. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, love Earthshock. And then we get to Time Flight. Oh dear, look at that cover. Look at that horrible looking cover. I have not seen Time Flight. It is on the worst list. I have seen some clips from this and the CGI looks absolutely horrible. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I expect it to be garbage. And of course then we start season 20 with Arc of Infinity, which I have seen. It's part of our Worst of Classic Who series. Oh dear, this one was really disappointing. The return of Omega was just such a letdown. I mean, there are some okay political elements to the story, but overall it's just so naff. I mean, Colin Baker's brilliant in it though, that's one saving grace, but yeah, episode 4 of this story is appalling. Ugh, Arc of Infinity, just a boring old bit of slodge. Snake Dance, I have seen this about 5 years ago, and I remember really liking it actually. Obviously this is the sequel to Kinder, so this is the second Mara story. And whilst I don't remember a lot about it, I just do remember really enjoying this one. It had a nice sort of creepy vibe to it, it's sort of a little bit surreal. Doesn't look as, I don't remember it being as surreal as how Kinder looks, but yeah, I do remember enjoying Snake Dance. We'll have to give that a rewatch at some point. And then we get to the Black Guardian trilogy with Mordrin Undead, the introduction of Turlo, and the return of Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. I have heard some very good things about this story. I am looking forward to seeing it when I eventually get up to it at some point, but yeah, I have heard that this is one of the best Davison stories, and I'm very intrigued as to how it plays out when I finally get up to watching it. And then the next one is Terminus, which is on our Worst of Classic Who list. Have not seen it yet. Nissa's exit story. I've heard this one it's the Peter Davison story of Peter Davison stories. I've heard it's very boring and plotting and just not very interesting, very low energy. We'll give more thoughts to this when I see it. And then we get to the last story in the Black Guardian trilogy, Enlightenment. Have not seen this story, however I've heard about it. Has quite a mixed reaction, this one. I've heard this one plays with sort of divine ideas like gods and demons, and well, not necessarily gods and demons, but just divinity as an idea for a Doctor Who episode has always interested me. And yeah, hopefully I will enjoy this one, because it seems like the kind of thing I would like, but yeah, we'll see. Enlightenment seems interesting. And then we have The King's Demons, which I've heard is absolute garbage. It's on our worst list, and yeah, it's two-parter, and it's, from what I've heard, it's absolutely pointless bollocks, but yeah, I have nothing more to say than that, because I haven't seen it, so I can't make a full comment, but yeah, from the sounds of it, King's Demons looks like something that I would not enjoy, and unfortunately I will have to watch it at some point. I mean, maybe I might like it, but yeah, not promising. Then of course we have The Five Doctors, 25th Anniversary Edition. This of course is the 20th anniversary story, The Five Doctors. 5th Doctor, 3rd Doctor, 1st Doctor, well, Richard Hurndall playing the 1st Doctor in this one. 2nd Doctor, Tom Baker makes a cameo, but it's his Sharda footage, so it's not really him. So it's not really the Five Doctors, but yeah. This story, the best way for me to describe the Five Doctors is it's fun fanwank. It's not the greatest plot of all time, but just look at what you get in this story. You get the return of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Doctors, Cybermen, Master, Daleks, you get this cool-as new villain, you get a dramatic plot, you get Sarah Jane K9, a whole bunch of companions returning in this one. It's just fun. It's such a fun adventure. It's such a... I think this is really a must-watch for anyone getting into Classic Who. Five Doctors is just... It's fun. It's such a fun story. I mean, look, it's not the greatest plot of all time, but look, it's fun. It's enjoyable. Enjoyable anniversary special. Of course, that means we are now at season 21. With Warriors of the Deep. Oh dear. We watched this one for the worst of Classic Who. This is by far, from what I've seen, the worst classic story. It is absolute drivel. I hate Warriors of the Deep. It was such a painful watch. Not only is the production worse than it ever is, but the story is so bad. It's just like this paper-thin idea stretched over 4 episodes, and it's just a whole bunch of filler scenes, and it's just crap. Just everything about Warriors of the Deep is crap. I never really want to watch this again, to be honest, but I'm sure someday I'll have to give it a rewatch for whatever reason, but I have reviewed it on the channel already, so I don't really have a big reason to, but good God, Warriors of the Deep is just horrible, horrible. I hate it so much. God. Drivel. Then we have The Awakening, which is a 2-parter. I have not seen The Awakening, but the visual elements from this story do look very interesting. I am looking forward to getting up to this one, because it does look like a very interesting tale. Could be a cracker. I've heard mixed reviews for this one. Some people really like it, some people don't. Unfortunately, the DVD did not print the letters properly, so we got a bit of a cut-off at the top there, but oh well. I mean, it's going to bother my OCD, but yeah, I mean, what can you do? But yeah, I have to say, it looks pretty cool from the outside, but who knows, maybe it's boring. I mean, to be fair, anything would be better than Warriors of the Deep, so can't be that bad. Then we have Frontios, which I have not seen, but I've heard good things about. I mean, I can't really make comments on it. I don't really know much about this story. It's by Christopher H. Bidman, so it's obviously going to be something sciencey, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard a lot about this story. It's one that sort of faded into the background, I think. I don't know. Guess we'll have to find out when I eventually watch it. Frontios. And now we have... Oh, hang on. Oh dear. Bear with me for a second. Resurrection of the Daleks. Yes, I have seen this story about 5 years ago. This story has a mixed reaction with fans, but personally, I really, really enjoy it. I think it's such a fun Dalek story. It's so deadly. I think from what I've heard, this story has a higher death count than the Terminator, which is crazy. But I do remember. I mean, I don't remember it vividly because it's been 5 years since I've seen it. But man, I enjoyed this so much. Seeing Fifth Doctor with Davros is cool. I feel like this is the story where the Fifth Doctor finally sort of came into his own with his character, because I find that the Fifth Doctor, his character is a bit underwhelming for a majority of his era, but he is good in this. And Tegan leaves in this one too, which is great, because I fucking hate Tegan. She can just die. All due respect. Yeah, Eirich Sayward again, like, I mean, I guess you could argue this story is kind of riding off the success of Earthshock and doing something similar, but with the Daleks instead of the Cybermen, but same time, great fun. I will have to definitely give this a rewatch at some point, because the 80s Dalek stories are generally considered to be very enjoyable. Then we have Planet of Fire, which introduces Perry, and it has the Master in it as well, and also introduces Chameleon, who is known to be the most useless companion of all time. And this story also has Turlo in short shorts. Yeah, if you're into that. Yeah, Planet of Fire, haven't seen it, but looks like an interesting watch. And then, of course, we have the Fifth Doctor's final story, The Caves of Androzani. One of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time, easily the Fifth Doctor's best. It's so good. Robert Holmes returns with a bang. It's just absolutely outstanding. I think Adam said this is his favourite classic story, and I can see why. It's definitely in my top tier of classic stories. It's just so good. The characters, the drama, the darkness of it. It's perfect for the Fifth Doctor. And I talk down to the Fifth Doctor quite a lot, because I'm not the biggest fan of the Fifth Doctor. I don't hate him, but he is one of my less preferred Doctors. However, this regeneration story is perfect for him. And honestly, it's probably, I mean, in regards to a regeneration story specifically, it's probably the best one we've ever had. I mean, I like the War Games more as a story, but as a regeneration story, this one's focus is so good. Shiraz Jack is one of the best villains of all time. And Morgus is great too, and just the overall war in this story, just the whole story itself is just full of twists and turns and drama. It's just so good. The acting as well, the design, the music, the production, it's just the best, probably the best that the classic series ever had. It's just so good. Easily the standout of the Davison era, just absolutely outstanding, and every Doctor would kill to have a regeneration story like this one, written by the godly Robert Holmes. Oh my god. Caves of Androzani, one of the all-time great Doctor Who stories. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, that is the end of the Fifth Doctor era, and now we move on to the Sixth Doctor. Now, we have the Sixth Doctor era, starting with the Twin Dilemma, which is often regarded as the worst Doctor Who story of all time. Haven't seen it yet. I've seen some clips. Looks insane. It's on our worst list, obviously. Yeah, I don't know. I can't judge it yet. I've heard some people say that it gets too much criticism, but I mean, I quite like Colin Baker as the Doctor, which is contrary, but I find his sort of his over-the-top, brash personality very entertaining, so I'm hoping that I enjoy this one, because I want to... It would fill me with some pride if I enjoyed the so-called worst story ever, but who knows, maybe it is that bad, but I guess we'll have to wait and find out. Now, put that there. Now we have the Attack of the Cybermen. I saw this 5 years ago, and I remember really enjoying it. Similar to Planet of the Daleks, this is sort of a mashup of Cyberman stories. And this is quite a violent one as well. It's very violent. But I do remember enjoying this very much. I mean, don't know why the Colin Baker era gets so much flack in terms of its quality. Like, I get at the time it was sort of there was negative feelings towards the era and the show itself, but like, I don't get why now it still gets criticism for being one of the worst ever. Because whilst it's not one of my favorite eras. Like, I enjoy Colin Baker's stories overall. I think they're quite good. But yeah, to each their own, I guess. Of course, Vengeance on Varos has to be my favourite Colin Baker story. It's so good. Brilliant classic story. Oh man, it's just so good. The fact that it's playing with game shows, it sort of influences the episode Bad Wolf, which is no bad thing in my opinion. Colin Baker puts in a hell of a performance as the Doctor in this episode. I love Vengeance on Varos. Dark, twisted, lovely story. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, so good. And then we have The Mark of the Rani, which I saw 5 years ago, and it's a really fun story actually. I enjoyed the Rani and the Masters dynamic, and Colin Baker was really good in it too. Mark of the Rani, I mean, I don't remember everything from it per se, but I just remember having a great time watching it, and I'm certainly will have to watch it again someday. But yeah, I just remember this one being really fun. So yeah, hopefully it stays that way on rewatch. And then of course we have the Two Doctors. Oh, I love the Two Doctors. I think 5 years ago when I watched this, it was one of those stories I just sat and watched all the way through, and it was so fun. I mean, how could it not be? Colin Baker, Sontaran's second Doctor, Jamie's in the story. I mean, it is obviously a bit of a weird one. It's very 80s, but I just remember being absolutely having a great time watching the Two Doctors. I mean, it's Robert Holmes. I mean, how could it not be great? Yeah, Two Doctors, love it. And then we have Time Lash. I have not seen Time Lash. It's on our worst list. I've heard this is one of the worst stories of all time. It does not look very good. I have to say, the design of this guy, though, this beast character, looks pretty cool, but apart from that, I'll have to wait and find out if it's really that bad, but it doesn't look very good, to be honest. And then we have Revelation of the Daleks. Of course, Eirich Saywood. Oh man, Revelation of the Daleks. One of the first classic DVDs I got. I bought this alongside the Time Meddler. I love this story. It's so much fun. So good. I mean, it's a bit of a weird one. Like, it's a very dark story, but it's also very 80s at the same time. It's got that weird blend, but I really enjoy it. Graham Harper's direction in this is so good. It just adds this great atmosphere to it. Seeing the Sixth Doctor with Davros is so cool, and yeah, this is just a really enjoyable story. I just really like it a lot. It's a great finale for season 22, actually. I think season 22 is really underrated, to be honest. I mean, obviously I haven't seen Time Lash yet, but of what I have seen, I mean, I can't really criticize it that much. I just found it very enjoyable. And of course we get to the Trial of a Time Lord, beginning with The Mysterious Planet. I have not seen The Mysterious Planet, but it does look interesting, obviously. Robert Holmes, one of his last stories. And all I've seen from this story is the opening shot. The opening shot looks really cool. I am looking forward to watching this story when I get up to it. Mysterious Planet. And then, of course, we have Mind Warp. This is quite a polarizing story. Adam says this is his favorite Colin Baker story. It looks absolutely out of this world crazy. I mean, it's written by the same guy who did Vengeance on Varos, so I guess you could say that Philip Martin is sort of the standout Colin Baker era writer, but of course I haven't seen Mind Warp, so you never know, maybe I won't like it, but yeah, it looks absolutely bonkers. I'm looking forward to getting to it. And then of course we have Terror of the Vervoids. The story that Chris Chibnall bashed for being basic and uninspired. Well, look where that got you, mate. I have not seen Terror of the Vervoids. But yeah, from what I've heard, it's Pip and Jane Baker. It can't be that great. I mean, then again, I did quite like Mark of the Rani, so maybe this one will be fun too. But yeah, seems quite like a bit of a basic one, and the the Vervoids are a bit of a funny design, aren't they? Yeah. I mean, you never know. Maybe I will like it. And then, of course, we have The Ultimate Foe. I have not seen The Ultimate Foe. This story is sort of infamous because the first episode's written by Bob Holmes, and then the second had to be written by Pip and Jane Baker because Eirich Sayward threw away Bob Holmes' script that he was unfinished, and that's quite sad because apparently this is a bit of a mishmash end to the Trial of a Time Lord arc, and that's a bit of a shame. Colin Baker, his last appearance on TV, is just kind of... I mean, even though I haven't seen this story per se, it just sort of seems like a bit of a sad one to talk about. I don't know. It's just like, this story sort of represents the Doctor Who in a strange spot, really, sort of at its lowest point in terms of the general public's view of it. But you never know. Maybe I will like it when I eventually watch it. But yeah, Trial of the Time Lord, an interesting arc that I have not seen any of. So we'll be interested to see how that turns out. Of course, that ends the 6th Doctor era, and that leads us on to the 7th Doctor era, starting with Time and the Rani. I have not seen this story yet. It is on the worst list, obviously. I have heard horrible things about it. Apparently it is one of the worst Doctor Who stories of all time. And apparently it's one of the most rushed ones as well. Yeah. Whew. Not looking forward to seeing this. I mean, maybe I'll end up enjoying it. I mean, you never know. Maybe I'll have a bit of a guilty pleasure for it. But yeah, by the sounds of it, does not sound good in the slightest. And then we get Paradise Towers, which I saw 5 years ago. And I remember enjoying it, I think I remember enjoying it to an extent, and then it got a bit ridiculous near the end. Paradise Towers, yeah, I mean, it's very camp, but I do remember enjoying it. I'm pretty sure it's on the worst list just because I want to watch it again, similar to The Dominators, how I saw that before, but I put it back on the worst list because I couldn't remember it very well. I can remember elements of this story, but I think I may have to watch it again with fresh eyes. But I do remember enjoying parts of it, to be honest. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to watch again. And then we get Delta and the Bannerman. A lot of people say this is their Doctor Who guilty pleasure. And I can sort of see why. It's an absolutely bonkers story. Yeah, I mean, in a sort of weird way, I sort of share that opinion slightly, that it's really weird and bonkers, and there's a sort of enjoyable factor to it, but overall, objectively, it's crap. It's so bad. It's absolutely it's just a garbage story. So terrible. It's like watching 4 different TV shows at the same time. Absolutely appalling. Ugh. It was so bad. Ugh. Don't want to touch it. Then, of course, we finish off season 24 with Dragonfire, the introduction story for Ace. This is on the worst list. I have not seen it. I have heard bad things about it, though. Very, very cheap. Apparently, it's McCoy's worst performance, so yeah. Season 24 is not very good, obviously, but yeah, I have to wait and see. Some people say this is by far the best of season 24. It's a step up from the rest of the stories. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but obviously there's that infamous cliffhanger that's completely retarded, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see for this one. And then the McCoy era, in all honesty, the McCoy era doesn't really start properly until we get to Remembrance of the Daleks, My God, one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time. It's so fun. Like, everything about this story is just fun from start to finish. I mean, how could you not like a story with the fucking special weapons Dalek? Like, that's just so awesome. It's just cool. Like, in every sense of the word, Remembrance of the Daleks is just a cool, fun story. We get to see Ace beat up a Dalek. We get to see Davros. Oh my God, so many great storylines. There's the Hand of Omega arc as well. It does a really good job of tying the show together on its 25th anniversary. Even though this isn't technically the 25th anniversary story, it should be. It should be regarded as it, because Remembrance of the Daleks is an absolute classic. And yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, I can't say more than that. It's so good. Pretty much my favourite McCoy story. I love Remembrance of the Daleks. And then of course we get the Happiness Patrol, which I have not seen, however, looks very interesting. I've seen some clips from this one. Candyman looks like a cool villain. It's got that great scene with the Seventh Doctor, his sort of speech on guns, and he's really manipulative in this story, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting up to this one and watching it, because it looks like the kind of thing that I would enjoy, sort of just like a contrast, the fact that it's got such upbeat, colourful tone, yet it's such a dark story. It's sort of reflective of the Seventh Doctor in a way, and that's great. I am looking forward to the Happiness Patrol. Looks promising. And then we get to the actual 25th anniversary story, Silver Nemesis, which I have not seen, but it's on the worst list, and from what I've heard, this is an absolutely retarded Cyberman story. Ooh, yeah, can't really make many comments on this. I haven't looked into it too much, but yeah, Silver Nemesis does not sound very promising in the slightest. Yeah, whew. We'll have to wait and see if it really is that bad. Of course, season 25 is ended by the greatest show in the galaxy, and if you watched our experimental episodes video, you will know that I love this story. Oh my God, greatest show in the galaxy is so good. Reflective of the Seventh Doctor's character. The clown is scary, Ace is awesome. Just everything about this story is so enjoyable. Such a dark, like, clownish story. Beautiful piece of television. I mean, I wouldn't say it's perfect, and I wouldn't say it's like top 10 or anything, but man, it's good. I love Greatest Show in the Galaxy. It's up there. It's so good. I love it so much. And then we get to season 26 with Battlefield. It's a story I have not seen, but it has the return of Brigadier, and apparently this story sort of plays into a sort of more fantasy role, which sounds interesting. And of course it's got Jean Marsh in it, and she's brilliant. I mean, I saw her as Sarah Kingdom in Dalek's Master Plan, and she was great in that, so yeah. Seems very promising, actually. I mean, season 26 is often regarded as one of the best, so I am interested to see how much I enjoy this when I end up getting to watch it. But yeah, Battlefield looks interesting. And then after that we have Ghostlight. I have heard that Ghostlight is a story that most people are very confused by when they first watch it, but after a few watches it can be very enjoyable. I've seen clips from this story. It looks great. Looks like a really good production. Looks really interesting. Possibly a tad confusing, but as the sort of start of the Ace trilogy, if you will, sort of going into her backstory, that's always a good thing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting up to this one, Ghostlight. And then, of course, we have The Curse of Fenric. Oh my God, I love The Curse of Fenric. Oh yes, probably my second favourite McCoy behind Remembrance of the Daleks. This one is so good. It's just, the production on it is just outstanding. What they managed to achieve with such little budget is so cool. Yeah, Curse of Fenric's a classic story. So good. The way it manages to tie into Ace's backstory is just outstanding. Seventh Doctor's brilliant in it. He's almost like a god in it. Curse of Fenric is, oh, it's so good. Oh, I get froth over all day. Great story. And of course, we end the Seventh Doctor era with Survival, which I have not seen for 5 years. However, I do remember elements of this story, and I do remember I enjoyed some parts of it. I do remember the ending felt a bit weird, though. Yeah, I do remember there was... I remember getting to the end of the story and being like, oh, is that it? But yeah, I do remember there were parts of it I enjoyed. Anthony Ainley is really good in this, though. Anthony Ainley is the master. Fantastic. But yeah, I will definitely need to rewatch Survival, because it is one of those, you know, I mean, obviously it's the last story of the classic series, so it is an important one. Yes. And then, as I might as well do it here, we have the TV movie with Paul McGann. The TV movie is, it's a big can of worms, actually, the TV movie, because I find it's sort of a guilty pleasure in a way. I think the first half of this is really enjoyable, but once the plot kicks in, it sort of turns into a bit of a typical drama, like an American Hollywood movie. But the first half is thrilling. I just find this so watchable. TV movie is just one of those episodes that's it's just so watchable. And Paul McGann is great. He's quite generic as the Doctor in it, but his performance is fantastic. And Eirich Roberts is the Master. It's very over the top, very camp, but in its own way, it's sort of enjoyable, I guess. Yeah, TV movie, mixed feelings on it, but overall, it is a bit of a guilty pleasure. Of course, that is the end of the classic series, so now we move on to the new series. Starting with Series 1, with Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor. Let it be known, this is my favourite series of Doctor Who. So much nostalgia in this one for me. Obviously, we have Rose, which is a brilliant opener. I absolutely love it. End of the World, which I think is really underrated. I think it has really good character development. Really enjoyable story. Unquiet Dead, nice bit of gothic horror by Mark Gatiss. So good. Aliens of London, World War III, really underrated two-parter. I think the Slovene are a fantastic villain. I absolutely love it, especially Part 1. Part 1 is very captivating. Dalek, which is one of the greatest episodes of television of all time. Bite Me, it's so good. I absolutely love Dalek. It's just top 10 all time. Dalek is so good. Oh, brilliant. Christopher Eccleston and Dalek is just out of this world. Then we have The Long Game, which is, it's alright. I mean, I'm okay with The Long Game. Nothing, I don't hate it, but it's alright. Then we have Father's Day, which I absolutely love. Oh, so good. Great character story for Rose Tyler. Such a great story. I absolutely love Father's Day. Then we have The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, an iconic story. I mean, pretty much everyone at this point respects it. It's just such a famous bit of television. Empty Child and Doctor Dances is absolutely brilliant. And then we have Boomtown, which I think is a very underrated sort of self-contained filler episode, which really dives into the Ninth Doctor's character, and I think it's really underrated. I think overall the Slovene are one of the most underrated villains. And then we have the finale, Bad Wolf, The Parting of the Ways, my favourite new series two-parter. It's absolutely unbelievable. I love this two-parter. Series 1 as a whole is just absolutely outstanding. I love... Pretty much the only episode that I don't love is The Long Game, and even that is okay. Everything else from this series I love, and Bad Wolf, Departing the Ways is an outstanding finale. Absolutely brilliant. Ninth Doctor got a fantastic series. Sad to see him go, but man, it was good. I absolutely adore Series 1. Of course, now we move on to the 10th Doctor, David Tennant, with Series 2. The Christmas Invasion, which is a really, really fun Christmas special. I love it. It's such a great intro for the 10th Doctor. Really enjoyable story for me. And then we have New Earth, which is, it's a bit off. I mean, I can find a lot of fun in New Earth, but yeah, it's not Davy's best story. New Earth's a bit of a... It's not a... I wouldn't say it's necessarily a dud, because I do actually quite enjoy it. But yeah, overall, New Earth, it's a bit of a downer in some regards. I know a lot of people that really don't like New Earth. Tooth and Claw. I actually really enjoy Tooth and Claw. I watched it recently and I enjoyed every second of it. It's a great bit of gothic horror. So much fun. Great werewolf. Great sort of Queen Victoria story. Tooth and Claw's brilliant. And then we have School Reunion, which is, I think, is an absolutely outstanding episode. So much fun. Great to see Sarah Jane back. I enjoy School Reunion so much. It's never gotten old for me. And then we have The Girl in the Fireplace, which I think is just a masterpiece. Stephen Moffat at his best. Oh, Girl in the Fireplace is just an absolutely brilliant episode. I love it so much. Then, of course, we get to the Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel two-parter. This is the first Doctor Who story I ever saw, so big nostalgia for me. I think it's so good. I can sort of get why people don't like the new Who Cybermen in comparison to the classics, because they aren't, admittedly, they aren't as good, but I still really like this as a story. I still think it's brilliant. I love the sort of modernized concept on the Cybermen it does. It's just cracking. It's so good. And then we have The Idiot's Lantern. Yeah, I've never been the biggest fan of The Idiot's Lantern. I don't hate it. I think it has an enjoyable quality to it, but a lot of it is... it just feels a bit off. The Wire as a villain isn't great, and I really feel like the Doctor is a bit mischaracterized in this episode, but overall, I don't hate it as much as some other people do, but yeah, Idiot's Lantern's not the best episode, to be honest. Then we get to the next half, and we get to The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit two-parter. Absolutely outstanding bit of sci-fi. I love The Impossible Planet, the Satan Pit. It's so good. The Ood is such a great idea for a villain, and the fact that it has the devil in it is just crazy. Really good episode for the 10th Doctor's character, and just absolutely outstanding. And then, of course, after that, we have the controversial Love and Monsters. Always separating opinion. I actually quite like Love and Monsters, have a real soft spot for it. I think it's a neat little story. The Absorbaloff is absolutely disgusting, but I think that's part of the fun, really. Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Love and Monsters. And then we move on to Fear Her, which is obviously... it's easily the worst episode of the Davies era by far. It's poor. It's just so bad. I mean, I can have fun with Fear Her, as opposed to some other dud episodes, but seriously, it's bad. It's just a crap episode, to be honest. I mean, it has some nice ideas in it, but I do like the Doctor and Rose in it, but honestly, just as an episode, it's really bad. And then we have the finale, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, which I just love. I love that finale. It's this epic, nostalgic bit of just epic sci-fi event television, in my opinion. Just an epic finale to Series 2. I can sort of see why some people might think that, especially if they're a classic fan, that it doesn't feel like Doctor Who. It's quite blockbustery, and the end of Doomsday is quite a soppy ending. I can get that, but honestly, in my opinion, I've never had a bad opinion on Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. I've always found it very enjoyable to watch, always found it very emotional, and yeah, it's just part of that era that I love from Doctor Who. And of course, that is the end of Series 2. So then we move on to Series 3. Oh yeah, boy, Series 3 is just awesome. Awesome series. I have not unboxed this, so I will just read out the episodes instead of unboxing it, but because I don't want to unbox it right now. The Runaway Bride is a really fun Christmas special. I enjoyed it a lot. It's just a great little start for Donna's character, and yeah, I just really enjoy The Runaway Bride overall. It's not the greatest thing of all time, but it's just a fun Christmas special, to be honest. And then Smith and Jones is a great start for Martha, and I just really enjoy it. The Jadoon are one of my it's just a fun monster, and I love the 10th Doctor in the episode. He's so zany and wacky and just sciencey. It's fantastic. Shakespeare Code, not necessarily my cup of tea. However, I do really enjoy it. I think it's a really fun episode. I like the fact they get to meet Shakespeare, and there's some nice little moments in the Shakespeare Code. I know Adam loves the Shakespeare Code. And then we have Gridlock, which I think is just absolutely outstanding. Brilliant episode of Doctor Who. Just, it feels like something from the 7th Doctor era. It's so good. Tennant is amazing in Gridlock, and I love the face of Bo in it. And it's just such a fantastic story. I think it's really underrated. And then we get to Daleks in Manhattan, Evolution of the Daleks, which is often regarded as one of the worst Dalek stories ever. And whilst I can sort of see why, because some of the ideas in it are really crazy and maybe not for everyone, I actually find it to be a very enjoyable two-parter. I find it to be very fun, engaging, and I love the American atmosphere in it as well. Daleks in Manhattan, Evolution of the Daleks, maybe take it with a grain of salt and watch it with a more casual mindset. You might have more fun. Then we have the Lazarus Experiment, which, I like the first half. I think the first half's really cool. I think just once Lazarus turns into a big scorpion monster, it just, the episode sort of goes downhill a bit. The end is a bit, the plot overall is a little bit disappointing, but I still enjoy Lazarus Experiment for what it is anyway, because the first half is quite good. And then we have 42, which is just sort of, it's a very generic episode. 42 is the definition of a filler. It's alright, I guess. It's a very vanilla Doctor Who episode. Just passes time, I guess, in a way. And then from that point on, Series 3 ramps up and becomes, like, for the next 5 weeks, it's just the greatest episodes, like, ever in a row. It's just unbelievable. Human Nature, the Family of Blood is such a masterpiece of a story. David Tennant gets a great performance as John Smith in it. Martha Jones is brilliant in it as well. It's such a great story. Paul Cornell is brilliant. Human Nature, the Family of Blood is an absolute gem. And that's followed up by Blink, which is one of the most famous episodes of television of all time. Blink is absolutely perfect. I love the Weeping Angels in it. So good. Blink's an absolute classic. And then that is followed up by Utopia, which is an absolutely outstanding return for the Master. So good. Derek Jacobi is chilling in it. And then, of course, that's part 1 of the 3-part finale. Of course, we get Sound of Drums, which is another great episode. I love John Sim playing the politician Master and just ruling Britain. It's just so engaging, just such watchable TV. And of course, the finale, Last of the Time Lords. I wouldn't say it's on the same quality as the last 5 episodes, but I still think it's really good. I think it's quite underrated. A lot of people tend to blame it for having a Deus Ex Machina ending because sort of the Doctor resurrects because he's prayed for. However, I think the way that the characters develop, especially Martha Jones and her family, makes it worth it. I think that's what sort of the focus of that episode was. And overall, a really, really nice finale for Series 3. Series 3 is absolutely outstanding. Maybe not be my number 1 favourite, but it's really up there. It may even be my number 2 favourite. It's so good. Absolutely love Series 3. Some of the best Doctor Who ever is in Series 3. It's just so good. And then we get to Series 4. Another great series. David Tennant and Donna Noble. Such a brilliant pairing. And, Series 4 in every sense of the word is epic. And it's hard to define it beyond that. Series 4 is just so good. Of course, we start with Voyage of the Damned, which I have been vocal before about in my Christmas special ranking. Out of all the episodes Davies wrote for the show, this is probably my least favourite. I don't hate it, I can still enjoy watching it, but there's just not much in it for me. Voyage of the Damned is a bit of a nothing episode for me. It's alright, I guess. But then we move on to actual Series 4. This is where the fun begins. Partners in Crime. I have so much fun with it. I mean, the Adipose is just... It's such a cool villain. The fact that they are these little fat things is just... It's so funny. Partners in Crime is such an entertaining episode. What a great way to start Series 4. Epic. In every sense of the word, Series 4 is just epic. And then we have The Fires of Pompeii. Again, brilliant story. I love The Fires of Pompeii. The moral dilemma in it is fantastic too. And the fact that it has Peter Capaldi and Karen Gillan in it is pretty cool too. Fires of Pompeii, it's so good. And then we have Planet of the U, which It's not necessarily one of my favourites, but I still really like it. I think it's a really cool sort of story and explores more of the Ood as in sort of a slavery environment. I think it's a really interesting story. Again, like Series 4, just like everything in this series is just so big and blockbustery, and there's so many action scenes in all these episodes, and it makes it for a really fun viewing. Planet of the Ood, yeah, really good. And then we get to the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky two-parter. This one gets a bit of flack. I can see why. Sontarans are sort of characterized a bit differently than they are in the classics. They're a bit more for comedic value in this than they are in the classics, but I really enjoy this two-parter. I think it's so good. Really, really cool world invasion for the Sontarans. And yeah, it really does sort of, there's a nice unit story as well. And the whole gas environment adds another layer to it as well. It's really cool. And then of course we have The Doctor's Daughter, which is a bit rough around the edges. However, I think it's really fun. I like the ideas in it. I think the idea that the Doctor having this genetic daughter randomly is kind of cool. And I think, and also it's an episode that brings Martha along, which is fun. And Donna's good in it too. Doctor's Daughter, yeah, it's not the greatest thing ever, and it's sort of, it sort of does this really heavy-handed thing with the Doctor's morality against guns, which is kind of off-putting, but overall, Doctor's Daughter is still a fun episode to watch. And then we have the Unicorn and the Wasp. Oh my god, comfort television. I know so many people that don't like this episode, but I think it's so fun. I love Unicorn and the Wasp. The fact that it brings back Agatha Christie, and the sort of like murder mystery. It's so much fun to watch. Unicorn and the Wasp is just one of those really fun episodes I can just turn on and enjoy every time. It's so good. Series 4, it's just outstanding. And then of course we get to the second half, which is where the real stuff gets, the series just ramps up the same way that Series 1 and Series 3 do. It really ramps up. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead is an outstanding two-parter. It's so good. There's a couple of things that niggle at me now because of Moffat. It's sort of retroactive, but overall, it's brilliant. The Vashta Narada is one of the scariest villains in Doctor Who history. It's so good. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead is absolutely outstanding, and I love it so much. And then that is followed up by Midnight, which is one of the best episodes of television in my opinion. Midnight is an absolute masterpiece. Probably the scariest episode in Doctor Who history. And it's on a low budget as well. David Tennant's performance in Midnight is absolutely outstanding. It's an absolute masterpiece, perfect episode of Doctor Who in my opinion. And then that is followed up by Turn Left, which is another masterpiece. Similar to Midnight, it's so good. Catherine Tate's performance is so blow away. I love Turn Left. Dark story, great alternate universe story, just everything about Turn Left. It's so good. Series 4 is just outstanding. And then we get the finale, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. To every extent, it is epic. It is like Doctor Who does the Avengers. It brings back Davros, has all the companions. Oh, it's just so good. Dalek invasion of Earth, modern day. I guess objectively there are parts of this story that aren't as brilliant as some others, but honestly, Stolen Earth and Journey's End for me is such an enjoyable story to watch. It is absolutely just bliss from start to finish. To be fair, the reality bomb is a bit ridiculous, and there are some points in the story that are a bit questionable, but look, it is, to every extent, it is epic. It is so awesome. And then, of course, we move on to the specials. And we will start with The Next Doctor, featuring David Morrissey. This is a really cool one, actually. It's not one of my favourite episodes, but I think it's very enjoyable. I think The Next Doctor is quite a cute little Christmas special. Sideman plot's a bit naff, but overall an enjoyable Christmas special. And then we have Planet of the Dead, which I think is quite an underrated episode actually. I think if this was in the middle of a series this would be more popular, but because it's a special it's sort of highlighted more, it's a bit more obvious. But I actually find a lot of enjoyment in Planet of the Dead. I think it's quite a fun episode. Oh boy. The Waters of Mars. This is pretty much my favourite episode of the new series. The Waters of Mars is absolutely unbelievable. Everything about this story I love. The flood, Captain Adelaide, the 10th Doctor, the plot, the story, the production, the acting, everything about Waters of Mars is unbelievable. It is perfect Doctor Who in my opinion. I absolutely love Waters of Mars, everything about it. I can't wait to get into an analysis of it because I love this story. It's quintessential Doctor Who. If you haven't seen The Waters of Mars, go watch it. It is so good. Everything about that story is just it's amazing. And then of course we get to End of Time Part 1 and End of Time Part 2. I'm not sure at this point, but this might be the most polarizing Doctor Who story of all time. There's sort of an equal number of people that love it and hate it, and I can absolutely see why. It's quite a contradictory regeneration story for the 10th Doctor. Very controversial elements. I addressed it briefly and before in other videos. Yeah, I can get why people don't like the End of Time, but personally I really enjoy it. Even though it has a lot of flaws and it is questionable, I do really enjoy the End of Time. I think it's a really poetic end to the 10th Doctor's arc, and yeah, personally, I mean, to be honest, the 10th Doctor is my favourite Doctor, so I'm quite biased in this, but yeah, I mean, overall, I can see why people hate it, but I personally love it. So there you go. That ends the Russell T Davies era. Of course, that means now we have to move on to the Moffat era, which will be a bit of a controversial one for me to discuss because I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it. But here we go, starting off with Series 5. Series 5 is a very popular series of Doctor Who, and understandable why, completely understandable. It's very fresh, that's what I could say. So of course we begin with The 11th Hour, which is an absolutely fantastic start for the 11th Doctor. I think 11th Hour is a brilliant episode to begin Series 5 in the Moffat era. So good, so good. And then we have The Beast Below, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I find The Beast Below to be a bit of a nothing episode. It's kind of a Moffat's first misfire in a way. I don't hate it, but it's just kind of there. Beast Below, not the biggest fan. Of course, that's nothing compared to Victory of the Daleks, which I absolutely hate with all my body and functions. This episode brings up a bile in me that you do not want to see. Not looking forward to reviewing this when we get to it. And then following that, we have the Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone two-parter. This is a very popular story, I've found. I don't love the Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone like other people do. I think it's good, but I don't think it's great. It's a nice sort of exhibition for the Weeping Angels, I guess you could say. It's a nice, scary sort of run-around horror, but I don't think this story is as great as people say it is. I just think it's lacking something. It's lacking a sort of character motivation, I think. It's a very, I don't know how to describe it. It's very focused on doing just one thing. Like, it's very focused on the horror elements as opposed to doing something, with a lot of variety. However, I do think it is quite good. It's very well made. I will say that. It's a very well made story. It's very watchable. But yeah, I would say it's a little bit overrated in my opinion. Then we get to the Vampires of Venice, which for some reason has never clicked with me. I've never been a fan of the Vampires of Venice. It's not the worst thing ever, but there's just nothing about this story that interests me for some reason. I find the fact that the vampires are fish to be a bit disappointing, and the sonic screwdriver is really used as a plot device in this episode, and it's kind of annoying. Vampires of Venice, not the biggest fan, to be honest. Amy's Choice, though, I do really like Amy's Choice. I think the fact that it plays with your dreams is really cool. It's a really cool concept. Toby Jones as the Dream Lord is great too. Only thing I would say is I'm not a big fan of the Dr. Amy and Rory love triangle, but apart from that, it's a really good episode, Amy's Choice. I like it a lot. And then we get The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood two-parter by Chris Chibnall. It's very competent, I will say that. It's a very competent story, but there's just not that much for me. It's very mild and very average. Yeah, it's alright, I guess. And then we have Vincent and the Doctor, which is just an absolute masterpiece. I love Vincent and the Doctor. It's probably my favourite Matt Smith episode, to be honest. It's so good. The story of Vincent van Gogh is just... Oh, it's so good. Vincent and the Doctor, I love that episode so much. Brilliant story. And then we have The Lodger. Lodger's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, actually. I mean, I know it's not the greatest thing ever, but like I just really enjoy watching it for some reason. I just have a lot of fun with The Lodger. I think it's a very fun episode. Nice bit of fluffy Doctor Who. And then we get to the finale. The Pandorica opens in the Big Bang. Again, similar to Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone. This is quite a popular story. It's quite a popular finale. And I find it a bit overrated. I don't know. It's fun. It's very watchable. Very fun story to watch. But as a story, I feel like it doesn't really go anywhere. It just feels like it's all build up and then the Big Bang is just a big messy conclusion. And whilst it's really watchable and really enjoyable, I don't know. I feel like it's not that great compared to some of the other finales, especially from the Davies era. But overall, it's not bad at all. It's still fun. But yeah, I don't know. Find it to be a bit overrated, to be honest. But yeah, Series 5 overall I do actually quite like. It's definitely one of the highlights of the Moffat era. I'm not as big on it as a lot of other people are. There's a lot of episodes, as I've stated, that I'm not big on from Series 5. But overall, it is very enjoyable. I will say that. I will always give Series 5 the benefit that it is a fun watch. That is for sure. However, what is not a fun watch is Series 6, which is one of my least favourite of all time. I absolutely despise this series. I think it's so bad, but we'll get into the episodes. I mean, it's not all bad. I guess there's some episodes I do like, but yeah, I really don't like Series 6. This is when the new series really dips in quality for me. A Christmas Carol, like, it's alright, I guess. I mean, I know a lot of people love it and say it's their best Christmas special, but for me, it's just not my cup of tea. I find it to be very cheesy, but it's alright, I guess. Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon is an opener. Now, Impossible Astronaut is a really intriguing opening episode. It sets up a very unique and something we haven't really seen before. It's this unique story arc of the Doctor dying, and it's interesting, and the silence is a great idea for a villain. I think they're very scary. They're a little bit mishandled, but they're very scary. Day of the Moon I don't think is as good as Part 1. It's a bit of a... like, it's still alright, but it's just a bit of a letdown compared to Part 1. I feel like this two-parter has problems that aren't really surfaced until later in the series, but I can see the Moffat's problems boiling under this story, and they're nicely hidden away by some really great production. But yeah, this story sort of represents when Doctor Who sort of changed from what it was to what it became, and it sort of became this sort of more Americanized worldwide show as opposed to this campy British show. And yeah, this two-parter niggles at me slightly. And then we have The Curse of the Black Spot, which is an absolute garbage. I hate this episode. It was the first episode as a kid to make me fall asleep. I think it's absolutely rotten. The script is terrible. The ideas are just so unoriginal. It's just dumb. It's such a dumb episode. I hate it. Oh, it's dull, unoriginal, boring, stupid. Ugh. Curse of the Black Spot, get away from me. Horrible episode. Then we have The Doctor's Wife. Doctor's Wife is a loved story. I get why. Personally, I don't love it as much as some other people do, but I do find enjoyment out of it. Especially for Series 6 standards, this is one of the standouts. It is quite good, Doctor's Wife. The fact that the Doctor finally gets to meet the TARDIS in human form is really cool. It's got a nice dark story with Amy and Rory as well, but yeah, overall, very solid episode, definitely. Then we get back down to the Rebel Flesh and the Almost People. I've spoken about the Flesh two-parter before on this channel. I really don't like the Flesh two-parter. I don't know why Moffat thought it was a good idea to give the guy who wrote Fear Her a two-parter. That was just bad. It really is one story that was stretched out to 2 episodes, and it just shouldn't have been. It's just so boring. I hate it so much. It's just, out of all the stories from New Who, Rebel Flesh the Almost People is arguably, for me, probably one of the hardest to watch because it's just such a drag. I really don't like it. I find the CGI it's just a failure. Like, I like campy sort of classic Who practical effects, but the CGI in this episode is just laughable. It's just an attempt to be scary, and it's just not. It's just really yuck. Ugh, I hate the Flesh two-parter. Just drivel. A Good Man Goes to War. As an episode as a kid, I quite liked it, but over time it's sort of slipped for me. I find it's really, really hollow. It lacks story. It's just all big hype episode for the Doctor, and it's just kind of annoying. Overall I would give this a positive rating because I do think it's relatively good. But A Good Man Goes to War, it's just over time, it's really slipped for me, and it really lacks substance. And I get this entire episode revolves around sort of the twist that River is Amy and Rory's daughter, but apart from that, it's just a hype episode. It's very series arc heavy and not very Doctor Who. It definitely feels more like an American episode to me, Good Man Goes to War. Of course, anything that was set up in Good Man Goes to War, which I wasn't too big on anyway, gets even worse with Let's Kill Hitler, which is just an absolute dreadful disaster episode. My god, I mean, to a degree, I have a slight guilty pleasure for some of the comedic elements in this, but as a story, it's just so bad. The execution as well, some of the dialogue and the acting is really bad in Let's Kill Hitler. There's easily the point where River Song's character gets broken down. It's so bad. It's such a bad episode. Let's Kill Hitler. Dreadful, dreadful. Series 6 really plunged here. And then Night Terrors isn't much better. I actually think Night Terrors is a bad episode. Really bad. Don't like it at all. It should be scary, but it's not. It's really dull, and it ends dumb as well. I hate the ending. It's just this horrible, horrible Power of Love ending. It's just, it's one of the things I hate the most about this series. I'm not a big fan of Night Terrors in the slightest. Of course, now we finally get to something that I really enjoy, The Girl Who Waited. Girl Who Waited is a fantastic episode. Showcase for Amy and Rory, and even the Doctor is really good in this. The concepts in this episode are fantastic. The fact that it's got young Amy and old Amy, and there's a conflict there. Just a classic episode of Doctor Who. It's so annoying that the rest of this series, like, apart from a couple of episodes, I'll get onto that one, I just don't like, it's just, The Girl Who Waited is a gem, a diamond in the rough, and so is the God Complex. God Complex is one of my favourite Matt Smith episodes. I love the God Complex. It's just so cool. Like, the concepts in this, the fact that they go into a hotel and there's all these rooms, it's just so awesome. And Matt Smith is brilliant in this episode. It's like he came back to his Series 5%, because the rest of the series is just a bit annoying. But in God Complex, he's really good. I love God Complex. It's a nice sort of, it caps off a bit of a story with Amy and the Doctor that, I mean, they sort of carried it on after this, but in its own, the God Complex and The Girl Who Waited especially as well, those 2 episodes for me are the saving grace of Series 6. I guess Doctor's Wife is pretty good too, but yeah, those 2 are the saving grace of this series. Absolutely outstanding, so good. But then, of course, we get to closing time. Oh, God, the worst use of the Cybermen in a story. My God, James Corden beating the Cybermen with the power of love, just appalling. I mean, I really liked The Lodger, so some of the comedic elements in closing time I do enjoy, but overall it's all ruined by the end. the fact that James Corden beats the Cybermen with the power of love is such a stain on this episode and just plunges it down. It's so horrible, so bad. Why the hell did this get commissioned? It's such an abomination to Doctor Who. And then the Wedding of River Song, which is just a mess finale. I hate it so much. For me, this is the first new series finale that I would class as really bad. Like, it's a really disappointing finale. All the other finales up to this point had either been really good or just even better, like classic. But this one, Wedding of River Song, is so disappointing. It just adds to why I do not like Series 6. It's just a messy, confusing, stupid finale. Just an abomination. Absolutely horrible. Ugh. Series 6. What a waste of time. God. And it doesn't get much better, because now we got Series 7, which I don't like as well. Oh dear. Oh no. Another abomination. The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. By far the worst Christmas special. It is absolutely painful to watch The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. It's so bad. Oh. If you want me to talk about that episode more, just watch out for when we have to defend it against Hellbent, because that was really hard. Because I hate this episode. It makes me really angry, The Doctor, Widow, and the Wardrobe. It's just so bad. And then Asylum of the Daleks. I have a personal vendetta against this episode. It's really highly ranked on DWM, and I hate it. It's by far, for me, the worst Dalek story. It's so disappointing. It's just so dumb. I hate the way Stephen Moffat writes the Daleks in this story. It's so dumb. Oh, it drives me up the wall. Oh, God, so bad. And then it doesn't get better, because Dinosaurs in the Spaceship is terrible as well. I hate Dinosaurs in the Spaceship. Absolute drivel. Good lord. How many episodes in a row does it have to be bad? Like, you had Closing Time, Wedding of River Song, Doctor Widow and the Wardrobe, Asylum of the Daleks, Dinosaurs in a Spaceship. It's like 5 stories in a row that I don't like, and in fact you have fucking Pond Life in the middle of this as well. Oh, Dinosaurs in a Spaceship is really silly. I know some people enjoy it because it's sort of a fun episode, but for me it's just, I hate it. Oh, it's so bad. Oh, it makes me really angry, of course. This horrible run is all saved by A Town Called Mercy. A Town Called Mercy, I think, is a really underrated episode. I think it's a classic Matt Smith. It's so much fun. Toby Whithouse, brilliant writer. He wrote The God Complex and he wrote this one, so he bookends the bad run. And Town Called Mercy, absolutely awesome. Lovely Western story. Really tests the Doctor as a character as well. I think that's one of the strengths of A Town Called Mercy. Really good. I love that episode. The Power of 3. Okay, so the Power of 3, the problem with the Power of 3 is it sets up really, like, decently. Like, it's actually quite a decent setup. The problem is the way it ends is so disappointing that it really knocks it down to sort of like that level. I mean, maybe not exactly that level, but it's down there. Power of 3, decent setup, but the ending of the episode is so disappointing. It's just, the Sonic saves the day. It is horrible. One of the most disappointing endings to a Doctor Who episode ever. And then we have The Angels Take Manhattan. I'm quite mixed on this one because the emotional elements of Amy and Rory leaving are really good. It's just the story itself is so messy, and the way it utilizes the angels is just not very good compared to the other ones. But the performances are really good. I think Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, Arthur Darvill, and Alex Kingston carry this story. And there are some scary moments, but yeah, too American, too timey-wimey. Moffat was just over-ambitious with this one. So many plot holes. It annoys me so much. But overall, hands, big hand to the actors for this one. They made it for me. And then, of course, we get the Snowmen. Next Christmas special, the 2012 one. A Snowman, I used to really like the Snowman, but I found over time I've drifted away from it. I find that the ending is a bit disappointing. Like a lot of the endings in this era, the power of tears beats the great intelligence. It's a bit dumb. However, I do think this episode showcases Matt Smith pretty well. His doctor is really interesting in this characterization, as well as Victorian Clara, which is the best Clara. Snowman, yeah, enjoyable, but has some disappointing factors to it. Bells of St. John. Interestingly enough, Moffat doesn't like Bells of St. John. He thought he didn't put in a good job for it. But it's funny because I actually quite like Bells of St. John. It's not a great episode by any means, but for Series 7 standards, it's actually really enjoyable. I find it a really fun watch. It's a nice pace, and Matt Smith's Doctor is surprisingly very charming in this episode compared to how he was in some other ones. I definitely think Purple Jacket Matt Smith he sort of changed up his character a bit, and that was a bit refreshing. Rings of Akaten is an infamously hated story. It's very low on DWM. Rings of Akaten, has its problems. It's very cheesy. Very, very, very cheesy. The production on it's quite crap. Very ambitious. However, for some reason, I actually quite like it. I think it's quite a fun episode. It has its problems, but I don't know. I've got a little bit of a soft spot for it. I don't know why. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's alright. I think I can look past some of the flaws and enjoy it for what it is. Then we get to Cold War, which is a story I used to quite enjoy, but yeah, I don't know. This one hasn't aged well for me. I feel like it's so full of padding and just gets quite boring in the middle. And the execution of the Ice Warrior is a bit off. It's just kind of... I feel like Series 7 really holds down some of these ideas. Cold War, yeah, it's quite mediocre overall. Then we get to Hyde, which is a very popular episode with some people. I think it's drivel. Again, Series 7 really, really holds back some of the core ideas that Doctor Who has. And, it's supposed to be a gothic horror, but I just don't find it scary. I find it really dull. And I think the Series 7 tone does not help Hyde in the slightest, and the end is so disappointing. It's just annoys me. It really annoys me. Then we get to Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, which is an episode I used to like quite a lot, and now I'm not so much. I think it's a really neat idea, but it's quite poorly executed. I think Stephen Thompson is quite a poor writer, as I have explained before. I hated Curse of the Black Spot, and this one isn't that great either. It's kind of it's a bit off. The brothers in this episode were not very good actors, and yeah, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, bit mediocre in my opinion. Crimson Horror, on the other hand, is an episode I used to hate, and for some reason I've got a bit more liking for it now. I don't know why. Maybe I've softened to Mark Gatiss' writing. But Crimson Horror, yeah, it's relatively enjoyable. It's got quite a unique layout in the fact that you don't see the Doctor for a while and then it flashbacks. And it's got that dark Mark Gatiss humour in it as well. Crimson Horror, it's a weird one, but yeah, I enjoy it for what it is. And then we have Nightmare in Silver, which I used to defend. I used to say it was underrated, but now I've rewatched it, and yeah, I mean, I don't hate it as much as some other people do, but this episode has problems. I mean, it's very obvious that Neil Gaiman wrote a script and it was changed massively by Moffat, and yeah, I can smell Moffat all over this episode, yeah. Nightmare in Silver, I mean, if you hate it, I completely understand you. I don't hate it, but yeah, it's not a great Cyberman story at all. Then we have Name of the Doctor. On paper, I should really, really, really hate this episode because it does things that I usually wouldn't like, but for some reason it gets away with it. I feel like the storytelling in this episode gets away with flaws that it has, but I really like some of the ideas in this. Like, Trenzalore is a really cool idea. The fact that the Doctor is going to die on this planet, even though it is reversed later. Name of the Doctor is a really enjoyable watch, and it sort of culminates the Matt Smith era in a way. It sort of wraps up a lot of the sort of arcs in sort of way. I think what this episode gets away with the most is that the Doctor has this secret, and a lot of the time in the Moffat era he would cock tease things and then not deliver on them, but somehow he managed to pull John Hurt out of the bag and have him be another Doctor. That's just pure luck. Moffat got away with murder with that. And yeah, the fact that Clara affects the Doctor's timeline and she's the reason why he won all his battles is really dumb, but I can look past it and enjoy the Name of the Doctor for what it is. Okay, now that we've finished Series 7, we can get that out of the way. We can move on to the 50th Anniversary Collector's Box Set. I'm not 100% sure on this, but from what I've heard, apparently these are limited. Not sure how much they're limited to, but they are limited, I think. Could be mistaken on that, but yeah, if it is limited, that's pretty cool. I've got a limited box set. And in this we have The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary episode of Doctor Who, which was, at the time, I think I said it was my favourite Doctor Who story. Since then I've rewatched it, and yeah, it's not my favourite anymore. There are flaws in it. The buzz of the 50th anniversary has sort of worn off a bit, so the shine on this episode is not as buzzy as it was when it first came out. However, I still do really enjoy Day of the Doctor anyway. I find it to be a very fun script. It doesn't necessarily do as much as you could do with a 50th anniversary, but as a story, I do really enjoy it. And even though it has some flaws in it, I find it so fun to watch, and it's by far my favourite episode of the sort of Series 7 arc, if you will. And it's sort of, it shows what Stephen Moffat can really do when he's backed up against the wall. And I can understand why some people found this episode disappointing, but for me it's just a lovely, memorable episode of Doctor Who, and I have so much fun watching it. And of course, that is all topped off with the, the Time of the Doctor, the 2013 Christmas special, which, although it has a lot of flaws, for whatever reason, I can always enjoy it. I touch more on the Time of the Doctor in my Christmas special countdown. It's hard to say really, because there are flaws of Time of the Doctor, but overall, as a regeneration story for Matt Smith, I did actually quite enjoy it. I think it's a nice, lovely story, and despite the flaws, it's enjoyable. But overall, I'm not really the biggest fan of the Matt Smith era, to be honest. There are a few gems in it, but really, it's not my cup of tea. Now I move on to the Peter Capaldi era, with Series 8. Let's get into the episodes. Deep Breath, I think, is a really good opener for Capaldi. Really enjoyable. Quite like it a lot, actually. Deep Breath feels very different to the rest of the series. That's good. Nice sort of historical setting, but yeah, Deep Breath is fantastic. Into the Dalek. I used to really not like Into the Dalek. It's grown on me slightly, but it's quite a dull episode. It's sort of let down by the Series 8 tone. The problem with this series is it really drags down a lot of the stories. Because a lot of the stories have neat ideas, but they're sort of dragged down by the dull tone that Series 8 has. But Into the Dalek, it's alright. It's alright, I guess. Robot of Sherwood. I have quite a guilty pleasure for Robot of Sherwood. I find it to be very fun. I know that it's sort of written in the vein of a Matt Smith episode, but I think Capaldi actually improves what would have been. I really enjoy Robot of Sherwood. It's just a bit of fun. Listen. Very controversial story, very polarizing. A lot of people have different opinions on Listen. I'm sure I'll be getting into it more further in a video, but basically, to sum it up, this is an episode that has a brilliant concept, and Series 8 drags it down. I do not hate Listen. I know Adam says before he really doesn't like Listen. I actually quite enjoy it. I used to love it. I don't love it anymore, but I still really like it. It's full of problems, but it is an episode I enjoy. And what it's trying to do, I think, is good. Unfortunately, it doesn't execute it that well, but yeah, I'll get more onto Listen in another video. It takes a lot of time to dig into Listen. It's quite a weird one. Time Heist, crap. I'm not a big fan. Don't hate it, but I just can't watch it. It's very confusing. Tries to set up too many things in the first 5 minutes. It's your usual Stephen Thompson bollocks. It's just not a very good episode. Moving on to The Caretaker, which I think might be my favourite episode of Series 8, and that's quite a controversial opinion actually. But I actually find The Caretaker to be very fun. It's just a really enjoyable episode. It's just, I know it's not the greatest thing of all time, but it's just so fun. Unlike the rest of Series 8, which is quite dull, The Caretaker is just, it's just enjoyable. I think Capaldi is so funny in The Caretaker. And then we get Kill the Moon. One of my least favourite episodes of Doctor Who ever. I think it's absolute bollocks. The fact that the moon's an egg lays us into a space dragon, and that space dragon lays another egg the same size as the moon. Bullshit. And yeah, it's just a really preachy episode, and I just do not enjoy it. It just really gets into my skin. I don't like Kill the Moon at all. But then we get Mummy and the Orange Express, which is a really cool idea. Again, a lot like a lot of other episodes in this series, similar to like Listen and whatnot. This episode is dragged down for me by Series 8's tone, and the whole Clara Doctor story I'm not a big fan of. However, the core idea in Mummy on the Orange Express is awesome. The fact that there's this mummy that can kill you in 66 seconds. Really cool idea. Don't think I love Mummy on the Orange Express as much as some other people do, but I do like it. I do really like it. I think it's good. That's followed by Flatline. Another great... I mean, obviously they're both written by Jamie Matheson, and he's just brilliant. Flatline, great idea, similar to Mummy. It's sort of dragged a bit down by the Series 8 tone, but I don't think this one has done as much. Clara is quite smug, though. Just it's a bit off-putting, but... yeah, Flatline is really cool. Definitely one of the strong points of Series 8 and the Capaldi era in general. In the Forest of the Night is absolute garbage. I remember after watching it, I was like, what the hell am I doing watching this TV show anymore? It's one of the worst Doctor Who episodes of all time. It's absolute drivel. I hate it. Absolutely despise this episode. It's just bad in every way. Moving on to the finale, Dark Water, Death in Heaven. Dark Water, I like. I think it's cool. Dark Water's a nice part one. However, I really feel like Death in Heaven lets it down big time. Really falls flat on its face. It's I don't like it. I don't like Death in Heaven. Disappointing end to that story. I think Dark Water was a nice setup, but Death in Heaven, man. Ugh, not a big fan. Overall, Series 8, I'm not a big fan of it. There are aspects to it I like, especially the 12th Doctor. I'm a big fan of Peter Capaldi as the Doctor. There are some episodes in there that I enjoy, but yeah, it's just kind of dull. It's not really good, and I don't like Clara, so yeah, that doesn't help. And the bloody romance with Danny Pink is just dull as dishwater. Ugh. Yeah, ugh. I remember not really... I think when I first watched Series 8, it was my least favourite series. That's changed because Series 6 and Series 7 are definitely worse for me, but Series 8, yeah, it's still not great. It's still not great. Some great moments, but yeah, it's a bit lackluster. Then we move on to the next Capaldi series. Series 9, which I have the limited edition box set for. Some lovely artwork on here. Let's get into the episodes. Last Christmas, which was sort of like a follow-up to Series 8. I'd addressed this in my Christmas special countdown. Not a big fan of Last Christmas. Again, like Death in Heaven, it's a very flat episode. I don't like it. It's just disappointing for me. I just feel like it rips off ideas from other movies and just doesn't do them as well. And the Clara storyline in Last Christmas is a mess. Yeah, not a big fan. Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar. Opening two-parter. Quite a divisive story. I feel like The Magician's Apprentice, whilst I can enjoy aspects of it, it's really slipped down my rankings because nothing really happens in part one, and a lot of what happens is quite silly. The Doctor playing a guitar, it's just kind of weird. And then The Witch is Familiar, it's better, but like there's just so many problems with this story. Like the way Moffat characterizes the Daleks is just not very good. The fact that, you know, a Daleks isn't exterminate, but it could just be saying "I love you" is just kind of weird. Yeah, I don't know. This is a very questionable Dalek story. Ugh. I mean, it's really well presented. It's really thrilling to watch, but just objectively, there's just so many problems with this two-parter. Ugh, Moffat. Ugh, messing with the canon. Then we get Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Outstanding. One of my favourite Capaldi stories. So good. Under the Lake is like a classic story. Based Under Siege with ghosts. So good. Very gothic. Before the Flood's even better. Puts a new twist on it. I love Before the Flood. Oh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant two-parter. Really holds up Series 9, I think. I think Series 9 is held up especially by this two-parter. Toby Whithouse, when he's on his best form, he's brilliant. Oh, just so good. Even Clara's likeable in this. Ugh, never happens. Oh, love this two-parter. Then we get The Girl Who Died. Oh, a lot of problems with The Girl Who Died. Really disappointing because Jamie Matheson wrote part of it, but then again it is co-written by Moffat as well. I'm not a big fan of The Girl Who Died. Really disappointing. The Doctor is really annoying in this episode, which is a shame because I loved Capaldi in Series 8, and in Series 9 he's all over the place. Sometimes he's really likeable, sometimes he's not. Yeah, it's just a way to shoehorn Maisie Williams into the show. It's just kind of there. Not a fan of The Girl Who Died. Woman Who Lived isn't that much better. I think it's preferable, but it's just really dull. It's just a really dull episode. Nice chemistry between Capaldi and Maisie Williams, though. I do like that, but yeah, as a story, it's just quite dull. I don't hate The Woman Who Lived, and I don't even hate The Girl Who Died to an extent, really, but they're just not very good. Zygon Inversion. Now, Part 1, the Zygon Invasion, I think is a very, very thrilling episode. One of my favourites of Series 9, to a degree. The writing is a bit heavy-handed. Again, it's written by Peter Harness, the guy who wrote Kill the Moon, and I hated the way he did Kill the Moon. This is also quite heavy-handed, sort of portraying the Zygons as ISIS, and that's a bit weird. However, as an episode, I really enjoy watching Zygon Invasion. I find it very thrilling. It reminds me of the Pertwee era in a way. Zygon Inversion. Oh, it's a bit more of a mixed bag, because the first half is very painful. You can feel Moffat writing the Doctor as he does in The Girl Who Died. Just really annoying Dr. Disco bullshit. Really, really don't like the first half. However, the second half is outstanding. The war speech is so good. I love the war speech in Zygon Inversion. So, yeah, I have mixed feelings on the second part. It's a hard one. Then we get to Sleep No More. Absolute drivel. Hate it. I absolutely despise Sleep No More. It's as bad as In the Forest of the Night and Kill the Moon. It's just a horrible, horrible episode. Mark Gatiss really messed up. This idea just did not work in the slightest. I do not like Sleep No More at all. Of course, that's all redeemed though, because Face the Raven is an outstanding episode. I love it. I think it's a great send-off. I think it's a great sort of death for Clara. The build-up's really good. I love the ideas, the fact that there's this sort of hidden alleyway. It reminds me of Harry Potter. The countdown with the Raven is awesome, and the way it ties in to the series arc is great. I think Face the Raven is a fantastic episode. Probably my second favourite of Capaldi episode. His performance in this is outstanding at the end especially. It's so good. Of course, this is beaten by the next episode, Heaven Sent. Oh my god. I mean, what haven't I already said about Heaven Sent? We addressed it in the experimental episodes video. Heaven Sent is an absolute masterpiece. One of the best episodes of Doctor Who of all time. I absolutely love Heaven Sent. It's an episode that grows on me every time I watch it even more. The soundtrack alone is outstanding, and Peter Capaldi's performance, one of the best Doctor performances of all time. Everything was firing on all cylinders, and Series 9 was looking to be one of the strongest series of the modern era until we get to Hell Bent. If you've been paying attention to our videos, you know me and Adam, you know how we feel about this story. In our opinion, Hellbent, the worst episode in the history of this show. I mean, we're going through the Classic Who, just to see if any stories from Classic Who that I haven't seen is worse than Hellbent, but I highly doubt it. I mean, I despise everything about Hellbent. It's just an episode, every time I think about it, there's a new thing I hate. Oh, it's drives me insane. Oh, I hate this episode so much. Messes with the canon so badly. I hate the way they bring back Clara. The Gallifrey wasted 10 years of build-up. It's bullshit. Ugh, horrible. Horrible episode. And then, moving on from that, we get the Husbands of River song, which is alright, I guess. Mention the Husbands of River song in my Christmas special countdown. Yeah, it's alright, I guess. Nice chemistry between Capaldi and Alex Kingston. I do like it to a degree, but yeah, not my favourite episode. I know a lot of people like it, but I was never really a big fan of River Song anyway, so it doesn't affect me that much, but it is a nice send-off for her. I just want to get this out of the way. Hell Bench just made me angry. Now we move on to Series 10. Of course, before this we have the Return of Dr. Mysterio. It's not on this disc. Return of Dr. Mysterio I addressed in my Christmas special countdown. Yeah, I get why people hate it, but I find it a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's a bit of fun. And then we get to Series 10, Part 1. I don't have the complete box set. Hopefully they release a limited edition one like Series 9 with both Return of Dr. Mysterio and Twice Upon a Time. That would be great. So let's get on to the episodes. The pilot, I thought this was really refreshing. It's not like a phenomenal episode or anything, but I thought it was a nice, refreshing start after the abomination that was Hellbent. Nice to start again. Really, really refreshing. Nice to finally have Doctor Who, Clara free. Bill got a really good introduction in this one too. It's just a nice episode to start the series on. Smile, yeah, it's alright, I guess. Better than In the Forest of the Night. Jesus Christ, Frank Cottrell voice improved there. Yeah, Smile, I enjoy Smile to a degree. It's not a great episode, but there are elements to it that I enjoy. The emoji bots are funny. The development between the Doctor and Bill I think is really good in the early episodes of this series, especially Thin Ice. Thin Ice gets a bit of flack because people say it's a bit too PC, but that's never really bothered me. Thin Ice is an episode I really enjoy. It's just a fun watch. Series 10 overall is a very fun series for me. It's more laid back than a lot of the Moffat series, and it's just nice to finally get some fun Doctor Who again, as opposed to really heavy stuff. Knock Knock, like Thin Ice, really enjoyable. Bit of horror. David Suchet is really good in it too. There's some creepy moments in it, like with the ants in the wood. The end of the episode's a little bit of a letdown, the fact that everyone survived, but oh well, it is still very fun. I do enjoy Knock Knock. Oxygen. Now, finally, Jamie Matheson gets to shine again. Oxygen is so good. I really like Oxygen. There are a couple of scenes that confuse me slightly, but overall, really good episode. I think the editing in this episode is sublime. The whole sequence where the Doctor goes blind is just so awesome. Oxygen, really, 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 really good episode. Then we get Extremis, which is the beginning of the Monk trilogy. I think the concept behind this, it's such a Moffat episode. Sorry, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the concept behind Extremis is really cool. The fact that there is this simulation world and the Doctor has to go through it being blind. The fact that it's all a simulation though, it's a little bit of a letdown at the end, and the fact that it's sort of a nothing episode, but I do enjoy Extremis. I think it's an episode that I'm going to soften to over the years when I rewatch it, because the concept behind it is quite cool. It's just that it's attached to this Monk trilogy, therefore it kind of lets it down slightly. And then we get to the second part of Series 10 with the Pyramid at the End of the World. So, obviously similar to Kill the Moon and the Zygon two-parter, it's written by Peter Harness, so it's going to be heavy-handed. This one doesn't bother me as much, though. I feel like it's a little bit more subtle. They don't go as hard on the political stuff as they do in the other ones. It's more sort of in vein of the Pertwee era level of political, as opposed to Kill the Moon, which was just appalling. I actually do really enjoy Pyramid at the End of the World. It's probably my favourite episode from the Monk trilogy. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it's just an enjoyable episode. It just moves the plot along nicely. And, of course, the last part of the Monk trilogy is The Lie of the Land. Oh dear, I do not like The Lie of the Land. I think it's a really disappointing end to the Monk trilogy. just annoyed me on first viewing. The fact that there's that fake regeneration, and the fact that it's all saved by Bill's mum, like the power of love. It's just not good. I did not like this episode, really. I mean, I don't hate it, and there are enjoyable parts to it, but yeah, Lie of the Land is not my cup of tea. Really disappointing end to that arc, to be honest. Empress of Mars, I mean, at this point, the series kind of ran out of energy and it got a bit slow. Empress of Mars it's a little bit boring. I mean, I enjoy it, I guess. I mean, I prefer it slightly to Cold War. But, I mean, it is fun. I mean, to be honest, it kind of reminds me of sort of Classic Who in a way. It's got the Ice Warriors in it, and it's a bit of fun. It's nothing serious. It's very Mark Gatiss. It's alright, I guess. Then we get the Eaters of Light, which is the return of Rona Monroe. It's the first classic writer to write for the new series. And, bit disappointing, I think. I thought the Eaters of Light was the weakest of Series 10. Just a really boring episode. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just boring. It's just very, very slow and disappointing. The end was a bit flat. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't like it that much. And then we get to the Series 10 finale with World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls. Oh, absolutely outstanding finale. World Enough in Time, this creepy Mondasian Cybermen brought back since the first time, since the 60s. It's the 10th planet design. Oh my god, I love it. The fact that Bill's converted to a Cyberman is so creepy, so scary. The timey-wimey elements of this next to the black hole, so good. The fact that John Sims' master comes back, I hate that it was spoiled, but it's so good anyway. And then the Doctor Falls, yeah, I can see why some people might think it has flaws, but I just love it personally. I find the Doctor Falls such a fun finale to watch. In fact, the Doctor Falls is my favourite Stephen Moffat finale, and it even ranks up there with some of the Davies finales. I think it's absolutely outstanding. I remember watching it at work when it aired, and it was so fun. I love this finale. World Enough in Time, Doctor Falls really makes Series 10 to me. So good to to have this finale, for me, to enjoy it that much after the past few that I didn't like. It's just so relieving. And yeah, Doctor Falls, I really, really like it. And of course, we have Twice Upon a Time after that. I don't have the DVD for that. I addressed that in my Christmas countdown. And then beyond that point, we've got Series 11. Obviously, the DVD hasn't come up for that yet. And then, of course, after that, we have the spin-offs. So we have the Sarah Jane Adventures, which I have not seen, really. I mean, I think I saw one or two episodes when I was young, but I don't even remember them, really. I'm looking forward to getting to this with Jake, because I think this will be interesting to review. Sarah Jane Adventures, I've heard really good things about it. I've heard that it's, for a kids show, it's really, really smart, and that's cool. And it kind of feels like Classic Who, that's what I've heard, so that's great. I mean, it's show ran by Davies, so of course I'm going to like it. And then we have Torchwood, of course. Lovely Captain Jack Harkness. Torchwood. So I've only seen Series 1 and some of Series 2. Overall, I'd say Series 1 is quite a mixed bag. I think it's quite poorly handled, and I think the fact that Davies wasn't there to really handle it, it kind of went out of control. But there are some episodes I like in Series 1, like Everything Changes, I think it's a good opener. I quite like some of the themes in Countryside, although the episode's quite boring. I think Greeks Bearing Gifts is quite enjoyable. They Keep Killing Susie is a neat idea, I guess. Out of Time is spectacular. My favourite from Series 1 is Out of Time. Out of Time is such a good episode. Captain Jack Harkness is a good episode too. It's a really cool backstory for Jack. But then, there's some duds in there as well. It's just kind of it's a real mixed bag, Series 1. Some episodes are so hard to watch as well. Series 2, I haven't seen all of it, but it's much better than Series 1, more consistent. I've actually enjoyed pretty much all the episodes so far. Adam is a standout episode from Series 2. Really, really, really good stuff. And yeah, I haven't seen the rest of it. I've heard it's quite good. Children of Earth, Adam from our channel tells me that Children of Earth is one of his favourite Doctor Who related stories. You know, it's one of his favourite stories in the Doctor Who canon, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that, see if it's worth all the hype. And then Miracle Day, Adam says the opposite. He says it's one of the worst, so should be interesting to get into those when we get to those. And I guess that just about wraps up my Doctor Who DVD collection, so hope you enjoyed that, and see you next time.